Shi Feng hovered on the rooftop balcony, eyes closed, as he tuned into the subtle ebbs of arcane energy below. Though the two enemy puppet masters had cloaked themselves in shadow, the faint necromantic trace of their marionette controller still pulsed through the palace walls. In moments, he'd homed in on their exact location. Solace, stationed beside him, whipped around in astonishment. "Your Highness, how did you pinpoint them so quickly?" Shi Feng opened his eyes and gave a half-smile. "That," he said softly, "is my secret." Solace bowed his head, clearly impressed and perhaps a little unnerved. Xiaoxue, sitting at the crystal viewing orb in the corner, glanced up and beckoned to him. "Master Bishop, please have a seat." Solace hurried to do so. Once he and Xiaoxue were settled, she turned to Shi Feng. "Xiaochen, start the live feed. I want to see exactly how our agent is faring over there." Shi Feng inclined his head, then laid a hand gently on the orb. On its surface, the image flickered and resolved into the moonlit courtyard of the bishop's private mansion, several blocks away. Outside that guarded estate, Xuexing slid from the carriage and took in her surroundings with a practiced eye. The coachman steered the horses through a side gate, out of sight of the main patrols, and carefully broke down the carriage frame for quick removal. Once the beasts were stabled and the gate locked from within, he melted back into the shadows. Under torchlight, Xuexing moved to the mansion's main entrance. She pushed open the carved oaken doors and slipped on to one of the polished wooden benches in the foyer, drawing her hood low to conceal her features. No sooner had she set her pack at her feet than a stable hand bustled in behind her, still holding her riding reins. Before the bench warmed to her weight, a palace guard charged through the arched doorway and seized the man's arm. "Stop right there. No stable hands are allowed inside without authorization." The groom, or rather, the estate's head stableman, started to stammer apologies. In his lower station, he had no right to cross these halls uninvited. Xuexing rose and stepped between them. She spoke with calm authority. "Beg your pardon, guard. I have Lord Solace's express permission to see the Master Bishop. If you'd be so kind as to show me the way." At the mention of Solace's name, the guard straightened and released the stable hand at once. He snapped to attention. "Of course, milady. Right this way, please." As the guard led her deeper into the mansion, Xuexing allowed herself the barest of smiles. Her entry had gone smoothly, and now the real work could begin. Back in the palace chamber, Xiaoxue and Solace leaned forward, watching every step unfold. Shi Feng kept his hand on the orb, eyes narrowed with anticipation. "They won't suspect her until it's too late," he murmured, and he was determined to make sure that, when the time came, they would simply be powerless to stop her. Shi Feng set his teacup down and studied the trembling groom. "Go on," he said quietly. "My lord," the groom stammered, voice shaking, "there's been an emergency. Fourth Prince Shi Feng has collapsed in the stables, and the 4 fine horses beside him are all gravely ill." Shi Feng's hand flew to his chest. His teacup clattered to the floor as he choked back a cough. He sprang to his feet, heart pounding. "That's impossible," he muttered, eyes narrowing. "He should have left hours ago." He stared down at the man before him. The stable gate had been locked. Yes, but its wall was barely 2 meters high. Shi Feng could easily have climbed out once he regained consciousness. Yet according to this groom, none of that happened. Shi Feng's face went cold, a flicker of lethal intent in his eyes. That morning, when the prince was shoved into the stables, the 2 guards had driven the groom away, and when the carriage returned to retrieve Shi Feng later, the guards went in person. There was no way this groom could have known the prince was still locked inside. Something wasn't right, and Shi Feng intended to uncover exactly what. Shi Feng clenched his jaw, squelching the furious urge to strike. He shrugged on his coat and spoke through gritted teeth. "Show me." The groom dared not hesitate. He hurried ahead, steering clear of any horses that might trample the prone figure. Before long, they arrived at the stable, the air thick with the acrid stench of manure. A guard at the door bowed low. "My lord, really, there's no need to enter such filth." Shi Feng pulled a clean handkerchief from his sleeve, pressing it over his nose and mouth. "I'll manage." He strode past them and into the dim interior. Straw littered the floor, but nothing caught his attention until he saw Shi Feng. The young man lay naked on the ground, his body limp and covered in blood. 4 fine horses huddled nearby, their flanks stained dark, whinnying softly in distress. Shi Feng's heart tightened. He knelt beside Shui Beng, carefully feeling for a pulse. To his relief, there was one, weak but unmistakably there. Still, Shui Beng's breathing was shallow, his legs slick with blood. He was fading fast and could slip away at any moment. "Someone fetch the physician," Shi Feng barked over his shoulder. He pressed a palm to Shui Beng's chest, willing him to hold on. Time was slipping away, and every second counted. Shui Xing rose to his feet, his voice low and authoritative. "Take him back to the residence at once and begin treatment." The 2 guards dared not hesitate. They hurried forward and lifted Shui Beng onto their shoulders. As they passed the trembling groom, Shui Xing's hand shot out without warning. One crack, and the man's head burst apart like an overripe melon. "We'll settle with him later." The guards exchanged horrified glances, but dared not object. Clearly, His Excellency intended to silence any loose ends. Within minutes, the prince's personal soul healers had gathered outside Shui Beng's chamber. One after another, they unleashed their healing spells, filling the room with brilliant pulses of soul energy. On the bed, Shui Beng lay unconscious, gaunt and soiled, a thin blanket barely covering him. At last, the flurry of healing magic subsided. The exhausted soul healers leaned against the walls, breathing heavily. "My lord," one of them spoke up, wiping the sweat from his brow, "the 4th prince's life is no longer in immediate danger. However, his constitution has been severely compromised. He'll need potent restorative tonics and plenty of time to recover from his deficiencies." A murmur ran through the group. They all knew the 4th prince's collapse had been self-inflicted. Years of reckless overindulgence had finally caught up with him. In all their years of experience, none of them had ever encountered someone so utterly consumed by desire. It was the very definition of desperation. They turned their gaze to Shui Beng's exposed leg, still streaked with fresh blood. Blood spurted everywhere. It was sheer madness. Even more disturbing was the strong, metallic tang in the air and the faint scent of horse lingering on Shui Beng's uniform. Had he really been trampled by a runaway steed? Rumors whispered of the 4th prince's depravity. Could he be so twisted? Shui Xing met their horrified stares with cold composure. "You've done well to rescue the 4th prince," he declared. "I will see that you are generously rewarded." Moments later, Shui Xing stepped out of the chamber, casually dabbing the last of the blood from his hands with a pristine white handkerchief. The captain of the guard, panting from his sprint, dropped to one knee before him. "My lord," the captain stammered, "I have failed you. 2 of my men were spirited away by unknown assailants who appeared out of nowhere." He dared a quick look at Shui Xing's face. The prince's eyes blazed with such fury that the captain's heart froze. "Worthless scum," Shui Xing snarled. "You call yourselves my soldiers? I have no use for cowards." His roar echoed through the courtyard like a thunderclap. The captain of the guard quivered so violently that he could barely remain standing. Shui Xing's shoulders tensed as he watched the captain of the guard back away nervously. After a moment's pause, he spoke in a calm but unmistakably cold voice. "Who were those 2 men who rescued Sergeant Wu and Sergeant Tang?" Captain Li swallowed. "Master Shui, they kept their faces covered. I couldn't recognize them." Shui Xing's eyes darkened. "And their martial souls, what kind did they manifest?" "They never released them, sir," Li stammered. "Whoever they are, they must be extremely powerful soul masters to conceal their martial souls so completely." A cold snarl escaped Shui Xing's lips. With a swift kick, he sent the captain sprawling across the hall. "Get out of my sight! I want every precinct, every patrol, searching Tiando City until you find those 2. Understood?" "Yes, Master Shui." Li scrambled to his feet and fled without another word. Alone now, Shui Xing closed the distance to the shattered remains of the entryway and studied the silence. Who could have slipped into his mansion so easily? It had to be one of his rivals, someone bold enough to strike today, yet cautious enough to vanish without a trace. Had they come just to save the guards, or were they laying the groundwork for a future ambush? No matter their motive, Shui Xing vowed to unmask them, and soon. In a hidden corner of the mansion, a pair of cold eyes tracked Shi Feng's every move. A chill ran down his spine, and he broke out in a cold sweat. If someone could spy on him so easily within his own home, Was his life never truly safe? Who could be behind such a plot? Before he could gather his thoughts, Xuexing's voice thundered through the hall. Move! A squad of guards sprang into action. Clear away the bodies. See to the fourth prince. Help him bathe and change into fresh clothes. No one suspicious is to approach. The moment he awakens, inform me at once. Xuexing's orders left no room for hesitation. His first priority was to secure both his own safety and Shi Feng's. The two rescued guards who remained missing were a minor concern. So long as Shi Feng denied any involvement, they posed no real threat. Xuexing intended to leave nothing to chance. Moments later, he summoned the mansion's physician. Prepare a nourishing tonic for the prince, he commanded firmly. Only the doctor's remedies could restore Shi Feng's weakened constitution. With that settled, Xuexing withdrew to his private chambers, flanked by vigilant guards. Shi Feng's heart pounded. If only Douluo were here now. He cursed himself for having thrown Shui Beng into the stable in a fit of rage. They've rescued those two guards, he said at last. Salas stood, straightening his shoulders. My lord, be cautious. Make sure they never discover our identities. Salas nodded crisply and hurried out. Shi Feng and Qian Renshui were left alone in the dimly lit chamber. They're in good hands, Qian Renshui replied, with a wry smile. Old Salas is meticulous. Decades of service have taught him well. Perhaps I was worrying over nothing, Shi Feng murmured, eyeing the two unconscious guards. They're completely out cold. Salas will see to it that they're quietly imprisoned. Whether he chooses to interrogate them or simply keep them locked away, we'll find out soon enough. Qian Renshui's expression darkened. I never imagined Xuexing could be so ruthless. Shui Beng barely escaped with his life, and still Xuexing wanted him dead. If Shui Beng pulls through and then insists Xuexing had nothing to do with it, these guards won't serve any purpose. Shi Feng rubbed his brow. Then keep close watch on Shui Beng. He's on the brink. He might not survive this night. If he doesn't, our problem solves itself. But if he does, we'll have another opportunity later on. All right. Qian Renshui gave a curt nod, though her eyes shone with regret. Their scheme had originally been simple. Let Douluo repay his debt to Xuexing. But fate had intervened. If Shui Beng was truly dead, they could exploit the tragedy to bring down Xuexing himself, all while ensuring no one suspected a carefully plotted conspiracy. After all, it would look like Xuexing's own blunder had led to his brother's demise. Soon, Salas returned. Qian Renshui issued a few last orders and then slipped away with Shi Feng. The two guards they'd captured were to be locked in the hidden chamber beneath Wuhun Hall, lost, effectively, to the world. Back in Xiaoying's courtyard, Qian Renshui turned to Shi Feng. Keep a close eye on the avalanche's aftermath, she warned. Then, realizing how long she'd been away, she added, I must return to the palace at once. The maids and guards will be wondering what's happened to me. As she prepared to leave, she paused, remembered something, and reached into her satchel. Pulling out a bundle of delicate undergarments, she handed them to Xiaoying. Here, she said with a soft smile. These will keep you warm. Then, without another word, she swept off toward the palace gates, leaving Shi Feng and Xiaoying alone beneath the courtyard's bruised dusk sky. Shi Feng's eyes brightened as Xiaoying held up a handful of damp linen. Miss, once I finish washing and drying these, I'll send them right up to you. A mischievous grin spread across Shi Feng's face. Shuer, he called, why don't I take care of the laundry for you? He recognized the tiny frilled garment all too well, undergarments. Both Qian Renshui and Xiaoying let out simultaneous shouts. Don't be ridiculous. Qian Renshui crossed her arms and stared him down. Keep your hands to yourself and erase those lewd thoughts from your mind. As she turned on her heel, Qian Renshui leaned close to Xiaoying and added in a lower voice, and keep an eye on him. He's always up to something. Xiaoying puffed out her chest. Don't worry, miss. My skills have improved. I can handle his tricks. Qian Renshui swept past them without a backward glance, ignoring Shi Feng's offer to escort her. He watched her retreating figure for a moment, then shrugged. With a playful smirk, he vaulted up onto the tiled roof and plopped down, legs dangling over the edge. Below, Xiaoying gave a small gasp of surprise when she saw him perched above. She hurried to the wash basin, quickly tucking the tiny undergarment behind her back as she rolled up her sleeves. Every few seconds, she shot Shi Feng a suspicious look, her brushstrokes growing a little faster. He simply waved down at her, fully enjoying the show as she resumed her scrubbing, one ear on the delicate fabric in her hand, or the other tuned for any sign of mischief from above. Shi Feng sat on the edge of the tiled roof, legs dangling into the night air, his silhouette framed by the pale moonlight. Below him, Xiaoying looked up, her dark eyes bright with curiosity. "Brother, why do you practice up here every night?" she asked, tilting her head. He pulled in a slow breath, exhaling faint mist. "My martial spirit is unusual. It responds best under the open sky. I progress a lot faster out here." Xiaoying's brow arched. "Unusual? What kind of spirit do you have?" He grinned, as if savoring the surprise. "A zombie." "A zombie?" She stared, stunned. "Can I see it?" "You will, when the time is right," he replied, chuckling. He hopped down and dusted off his pants. Turning to her, he added, "And Xiaoying, remember the technique I taught you. Do it every night." Her cheeks flushed scarlet. "Right, every night. I won't forget." Shi Feng's expression grew serious. "Just stick to the exact points we practiced. Don't stray to any other areas, or you risk damaging your reproductive qi." "Reproductive qi?" Her face went pale. "You mean I could lose my chance to have children?" He nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Yes, it's not something to mess around with." Xiaoying rocked on her heels, gulping. I didn't know it was that important." He softened. "Trust me, I'm only warning you because I've seen what can happen." She bit her lip, then looked up at him, eyes narrowed. "How do you know so much about this?" she demanded, planting her fists on her hips. Shi Feng let out a quiet laugh. "Let's just say I did my homework." Xiaoying crossed her arms and stamped her foot. "You bastard! How did you find out?" He merely smiled, the moonlight catching in his eyes. "All in good time. Now go, practice diligently." With that, she turned and hurried down the stairs, her cheeks still burning. Shi Feng watched her go, then settled back against the roof tiles, the night wind whispering promises of power and secrets yet to be revealed. "Did you peek?" Xiaoying's voice trembled with accusation. Shi Feng's cheeks burned. He cleared his throat twice, struggling to hide his embarrassment. "I really didn't peek. I only heard your voice change and worried you might hit the wrong pressure points, so I called out a warning." He insisted he hadn't meant to pry. The night before, when Xiaoying's sudden, high-pitched cry had echoed through the halls, he'd glanced her way out of concern, just once. Now she stood silent, crimson-faced, mortified that he'd overheard. Hastily, she hung Qian Renshui's robes on the rack and darted back into her room. Shi Feng offered a strained smile, rebuking himself inwardly. This was no time for distractions. Young disciples needed to focus on cultivation. He'd only warned her to keep her from becoming dependent on whatever technique she was practicing. His gaze drifted to a row of small garments hanging below. They were far too large for Xiaoying, nearly the same size as their senior sister's robes. He filed the odd detail away and turned his attention back to Shui Beng. In the avalanche chamber, attendants were busy administering a stream of restorative tonics. Two maids flitted about, carefully measuring doses and ensuring Shui Beng received exactly what he needed. Shi Feng watched them work, determination settling in his chest. No matter the cost, he would see Shui Beng safely through his recovery and uncover the truth behind these strange events. Chapter 203. A sharp-tailed swift had gathered a handful of twigs and was diligently weaving them into a nest in the branches of the old elm outside Shi Feng's window. From my vantage point at the desk, I watched every movement, my gaze never wavering. No ordinary bird would dare settle so close. My home's wards and sentries formed an invisible fortress, ensuring that not even a fly slipped through. If I could sprout wings on a whim, I'd have darted out and pecked that arrogant swift into oblivion. But with guards posted both inside and out, any reckless attack would be suicide. I exhaled, forcing the irritation down. With a subtle mental command, I turned to the little black sparrow perched on my shoulder. "Keep an eye on it," I thought. "Let me know the moment it makes a move." The sparrow chirped softly in acknowledgement. Together we fell silent, the two of us locked in a tense watch beneath the spreading elm. Not long after, the little black sparrow swooped down, clutching another freshly caught bird in its talons. A moment later, Shi Feng surveyed the three fledglings perched before him and pointed at the little black sparrow. "You're number 1. The sharp-tailed swift is number 2, and our newcomer is number 3. 3 should be more than enough. At dawn, there was still no sign of Shi Feng's condition worsening. Using his spirit-sensing ability, Shi Feng detected that Shi Feng's aura had grown markedly stronger. Clearly, the man wasn't going to die from his injuries, and those 2 bodyguards he'd seized were now redundant. Even after such brutal treatment, Shi Feng was certain that once Shi Feng regained consciousness, he'd still obey Shui Xing's orders, and there was virtually no chance he'd spill everything on his own. Shi Feng sighed inwardly. Forget it. I'll find another way to deal with those uncle and nephew troublemakers later. He offered a brief nod to Xiaoying, then stepped outside, intent on meeting Du Yan. On the outskirts of the city, in a quiet hotel room, Du Yan slipped inside and locked the door behind her. She looked up at Shi Feng, admiration shining in her eyes. Master! Shi Feng watched with quiet satisfaction as his scheme took effect. Du Yan's grandfather had severed ties with the old General Shui Xing, exactly as planned. Now the path was clear to strike at Prince Shui Beng. You did an excellent job, Shi Feng praised. Du Yan's eyes lit up at the compliment. It was all thanks to your plan, Master. She hesitated only for a moment before blurting out, Master, when will we deal with Shui Beng? Shi Feng folded his arms. He's still a prince of the realm. If we eliminate him rashly, any mistake could expose us. We need a flawless strategy, one that leaves no trace. I'll work on it right away. Du Yan nodded eagerly. Understood. Then her brow furrowed. My grandfather says he's heading to Wuhun City soon, and he insists I go with him. I don't want to leave. Shi Feng raised an eyebrow. Is this because you don't want to be apart from Yu Tianheng? She bit her lip, conflicted. That's part of it, yes. But more than anything, I want to stay and witness Shi Beng's downfall with my own eyes. Shi Feng regarded her thoughtfully. Fierce and untamed among others, Du Yan could still show vulnerability in his presence. Your grandfather only wants to keep you safe. He worries it's too dangerous here for you alone. Du Yan's expression softened, but her resolve remained. Master, could you persuade him to let me stay? Shi Feng offered a reassuring smile. Leave it to me. He stepped forward, ready to negotiate with her grandfather, and ensure that, when the time came, not even a whisper of their involvement would be traced back to them. Shi Feng watched the sunset bleed into the horizon. Shui Beng is still alive, he said at last. Du Yan looked down, fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve. My grandfather refuses to let me stay. Shi Feng leaned forward, steepling his fingers. Then tell him to meet me at the monastery. I'll wait there. Du Yan's eyes lit up with relief. Thank you, Master. I'll fetch him right away. Go, he replied firmly. Though Du Yan now answered to him, Shi Feng dared not face Du Bo alone. The last time he'd challenged the Du family head, Bibi Dong and several titled Douluo had stood guard at his side. This time, no such protection existed, and Du Bo's promises rang hollow whenever a life was at stake. Bibi Dong had given him fair warning. A titled Douluo always sits within those temple walls. Shi Feng would not risk his future on mere words. As night fell, he slipped from the inn and returned to his estate. A hidden passage led him straight to Solace's study, where candles cast long shadows across scroll-lined walls. The moment Shi Feng appeared, Solace rose in a smooth, practiced motion. Your Highness, Solace greeted, voice hushed. Have we made any headway? Shi Feng shook his head. Not yet. Keep the 2 castle guards imprisoned for now. Mem here to let you know that Du Bo will arrive soon at the monastery. Solace inclined his head. I will ready our defenses. Shi Feng closed his eyes for a moment, steadying his resolve. Good. We cannot afford mistakes. Outside, the wind carried the distant chanting from the temple grounds, an ominous reminder that the real test was just beginning. Shi Feng looked at Solace and said, I need to speak with the elders. Solace's expression grew serious. Understood. I'll invite the temple elders right away. With a polite nod, Shi Feng watched as Solace hurried off. A few moments later, the heavy doors of the inner hall swung open and an older man stepped inside. He was of medium build, his salt and pepper hair tied neatly at the back, and his stride carried the quiet intensity of a prowling tiger. Yet the moment he laid eyes on Shi Feng, his fierce aura melted away, replaced by a warm smile. Heard from Solace last night that the Pope's favored disciple has arrived in Heaven Due City, the elder said amiably. Greetings, elder, Shi Feng replied, inclining his head respectfully. The elder waved a hand, chuckling. Please, no need for such formality, holy son. Shi Feng noted the elder's friendly demeanor, undoubtedly a loyalist of Bibi Dong as well. The elder continued, Solace told me you swiftly diffused Dugubo's rebellion and persuaded him to go to Wuhan City of his own accord. Quite the hero, and still so young. Shi Feng returned the smile with modesty. You're too kind, elder. I simply did what needed to be done. The elder's eyes twinkled. Humility suits you. Come, let us sit and talk. Please, just call me Xiaochen, Shi Feng said with a friendly nod. The elder's stern features softened into a broad smile. Very well, Xiaochen. I'm the 9th elder among our ranks, so 9th elder it is. Before this meeting, 9th elder had been uneasy. Rumors said the Pope's holy son was aloof, even prickly. But standing before Shi Feng now, he found his worries unfounded. The young man radiated a calm warmth that was hard not to like. After all, being the Pope's favored disciple meant Shi Feng's goodwill could tip the scales of influence and resources within the sect. Yes, 9th elder, Shi Feng replied, his tone both warm and respectful. The two of them exchanged nods, and a newfound accord settled between them, one that might well shape the future of the entire order. Shi Feng and the 9th elder settled into the main hall, discussing the future Pope's rise and the role the titled Douluo would play as his chief aides. Their polite conversation flowed smoothly, until Solace burst in through the side door, flanked by a tall figure draped head to toe in a black cloak. When the visitor lifted his wide-brimmed hat, Shi Feng recognized him at once. Dugubo, Shi Feng cried, rising to his feet. It's been too long. The 9th elder rose as well, concern flashing in his eyes. Though Dugubo had formally surrendered to Wuhun Palace, he had yet to prove his loyalty in action, and that uncertainty kept them both guarded. Dugubo's normally stern features softened into a faint smile. So it really is you, he said. Yanyan told me you were here, but I wasn't entirely convinced until now. Please, have a seat, Shi Feng offered, gesturing to an empty chair. I ran into Yanyan earlier. She mentioned you were bound for Wuhan City, traveling alone. She didn't want to come along. Dugubo inclined his head. My promise to Elder stands. Since he vowed to assist Wuhun Palace, I won't see that promise broken. Yanyan gave a curt nod. My marriage to Prince Shuixing has been finalized. I should set out at once. Dugubo's brow furrowed. Your betrothal is secure, granddaughter, yet these lands can be treacherous. I worry about you staying here all alone. Shi Feng stepped forward, offering a reassuring smile. Elder Dugu, please don't trouble yourself. I'll be based in Tiando City for the foreseeable future. I can arrange for Yanyan to live within the Spirit Hall. With the hall's protection, no one will dare harm her. At those words, Dugubo's heart softened. He had long admired this young man's talents, and until recently, even dreamed of seeing his granddaughter paired with him. If Yanyan could take up residence in the Spirit Hall, that dream might yet be possible. Besides, who could fault a girl her age for losing her innocence? And under the watchful eyes of the hall's titled Douluo, her safety would be all but guaranteed. Still, responsibility weighed on him. He rubbed his temples and sighed. Ah, but female adepts aren't normally permitted to reside in the Spirit Hall. Shi Feng smiled and inclined his head. Since Yanyan wishes to stay, I'll leave her in your care, Xiaochen. Don't worry, Senior Dugu, Xiaochen replied with firm confidence. I'll watch over Yanyan and make sure no one dares bully her. At Shi Feng's assurance, Dugubo breathed a deep sigh of relief. He was no longer the headstrong youth he'd once been. Age had mellowed him, and all he wanted now was a quiet retirement. Wuhundian's influence was strong, and if his beloved granddaughter could journey forward at Shi Feng's side, he felt he could rest easy, though he couldn't shake the uneasy thought that life seldom plays out so neatly. Their conversation wound down, and Dugubo rose to depart. Shi Feng bowed respectfully to the 9th elder and Solace, then turned toward his own lodging. When he stepped into the small courtyard, he found Xiaoying already waiting with a freshly prepared meal laid out on the low table. Shi Feng's lips curved in satisfaction. His patient guidance had clearly borne fruit. They ate quietly, then set out together toward the palace, each absorbed in their own thoughts. Across the compound, the mood in Shi Beng's private chambers had shifted dramatically. Two timid maidservants hovered at his bedside, their small hands fumbling nervously as they began to loosen the fastenings of his robes in order to help him bathe. But the moment they caught sight of Shui Beng's torso, their color drained away, and they froze in shock. His body revealed marks and musculature unlike anything they'd ever seen before. Two blood-curdling screams rang out, rattling everyone's nerves. At once, the guards outside the chamber exchanged alarmed glances and burst through the door. Even the scout perched in the tree, codenamed Sharp-Tailed Swift, leaned forward to see what was happening. Inside, Shui Beng's shirt hung open, revealing his lower abdomen streaked with coin-sized crimson blotches. The deep red welts looked almost alive. The captain of the guard strode up and, without hesitation, yanked Shui Beng's trousers down. The two young maids shrieked in horror. I caught sight of a furious rash encircling Shui Beng's painfully contracted genitals, the inflammation growing thickest at its center. "Quiet!" the captain barked, slapping a heavy hand over one maid's mouth as the other tried to scream again. One guard stumbled back, eyes wide. "Captain, this is Hualiu." "Silence! Don't spout nonsense," the captain snarled. He crouched beside Shui Beng, inspecting the spreading sores with a grim expression. "It wasn't here last night. Hualiu can't set in this fast. You two stay here and keep watch. Do not let anyone approach. I'll report to the prince immediately." With that, he stormed out, leaving us all tense and waiting for orders. Everyone else froze, staring at Shui Beng in horror. No one dared move closer. Who knew what this thing was, or if it might be contagious? From further down the corridor, Shi Feng couldn't help but chuckle. Well, well, looks like we've got ourselves a show." With that, he hurried forward, eager to see what would happen next. Xiaoying's eyes gleamed with excitement as she hurried to follow Shi Feng. She'd learned the phrase, "eating melons," only yesterday, and that meant there was fresh gossip to hear. It was early afternoon, just before Qian Renshui's lunch break, and Shi Feng tapped the table twice to get her attention before rising with Xiaoying at his side. As they approached, Qian Renshui shook off her drowsiness. "What's the latest on the Shui Beng situation?" she asked even before Shi Feng could sit. He poured himself a cup of tea, lifted it to his lips, then set it down with a small, knowing smile. "There's been a development." Qian Renshui, who had been about to speak, paused when she saw that mischievous glint in his eye. She settled beside him, gently smoothing back a strand of hair, and urged, "Do tell, what's new?" Shi Feng's smile widened. "Shui Beng has apparently contracted the willow sickness." Qian Renshui's eyes went wide. "What? That's impossible. This all started just yesterday, and I fell ill today." "From what I've heard, willow sickness is notoriously hard to cure. Once someone reaches the advanced stage, even a Douluo-level soul healer struggles to treat it." Shi Feng nodded. "That's true in many cases, but willow sickness isn't a single disease. There are several variants, and some respond better to treatment than others. High-risk strains show symptoms within a day or two," Shi Feng explained, "while the others take longer to incubate." Xiaoying immediately raised her hand. "Excuse me, what exactly is the incubation period?" "It's the time between infection and the first appearance of symptoms," Shi Feng replied. Qian Renshui frowned. "Shui Beng is still alive? Can we learn something from his case?" Shi Feng nodded. "Let's go see him right away." At the prince's mansion, Shui Xing burst into Shui Beng's chamber, flanked by several guards. The young man lay on the bed, barely dressed, his skin covered in dense, blood-red lesions. Shui Xing pressed a handkerchief to her nose and strode forward to inspect him. She knelt at the bedside, sweeping aside the edges of the rash. At its center, the eruptions were fiercest. No patch of normal flesh remained. Worse still, the small device implanted at Shui Beng's side, the so-called inheritance conduit, had shriveled and begun to decay, emitting a sickly, putrid odor. A deep groan escaped the old prince as the stench hit him. He turned, retching violently, and bolted from the room. Moments later, the sound of his retching filled the corridor, only subsiding once every last drop of his luncheon had been expelled. Shui Xing rose, her face pale but determined. "We'll need to quarantine him immediately and examine every scrap of tissue we can sample. If this is how the conduit reacts when infected, we may finally understand its vulnerabilities." He dared not enter again. Instead, he summoned the captain of the guard. "Go at once and bring me the finest soul healer in Tiando City. Pay whatever fee is required." The captain bowed briskly and hurried off. Before long, he returned, escorting an elderly man of perhaps 80 years. The healer's white robe was moonlit pale, his face deeply lined with age, and yet he moved with surprising vigor. Upon seeing the fourth prince's condition, the old man's eyes widened in alarm. He knelt by the prince's side, laid 2 fingers against his pulse, and examined him intently, unshaken by the chamber's grim atmosphere. After a moment, the healer rose, his expression grave. Lord Xuexing waved dismissively at the onlookers, and they filed out until only he and the healer remained. "My lord," the healer said, soft bowing his head, "the fourth prince, Shui Beng, is in a perilous state." Xuexing's brow creased. "Explain yourself," he commanded, his voice regal. "I have overseen countless maladies, yet ailments only grow more difficult the longer they fester. Are you telling me he's entered the late stage of his illness?" The healer nodded. "I'm afraid so." Xuexing's face darkened. "Impossible," he protested. "Last night I saw him myself. There was none trace of this then." Lord Xuexing stared at the elderly healer, tension coiling in his shoulders. "You think this is a mutation?" he demanded. "That would make it far harder to treat." The old man inclined his head gravely. "That's my assessment. Cases like this are always tricky." Xuexing's patience snapped. "Then speak plainly. If you can cure him, name your price. If not, you'll be replaced." After a brief pause, the healer replied, "In all of Tiando City, I know this disease better than anyone. I've cured patients struck by the same affliction." "How long will it take?" Xuexing pressed, voice low. "Under ideal circumstances, no more than 3 days." Xuexing's jaw tightened. Shi Feng's 20th birthday celebration was tomorrow. If the fourth prince failed to appear, the court would plunge into chaos. He turned away, staring out at the moonlit gardens. "Can you finish by then?" The old man shook his head. "I'm afraid recovery won't be that swift." A dark gleam entered Xuexing's eyes. "Then you will remain in the mansion until Prince Shi Feng makes a full recovery. Do you understand?" The healer bowed. With a single movement, he summoned his martial spirit. A slender scepter appeared in his hand, crowned by an egg-sized milky white gem that shimmered with latent power. Beneath his feet, 7 perfectly aligned soul rings emerged, each humming with refined healing energy. A soul emperor of unrivaled skill had taken up his duty. The old man leaned forward, a triumphant gleam in his eye. "My soul arts have unique powers against human maladies. Had anyone else attempted this, they couldn't have restored the fourth prince in just 3 days." As he spoke, motes of pale light drifted from his outstretched hands and settled over Shi Feng's still form. Instantly, the chamber was bathed in a blinding white radiance, so intense that the walls seemed to vanish. Moments later, Shi Feng's breath shuddered, his eyelids fluttered, then slowly peeled open. At that instant, the old man withdrew his power, a satisfied smile curling at the corners of his lips. Xuexing paused at the threshold, then turned back to see Sui Beng's eyes flutter open. As consciousness crept back, memories of yesterday's horrors washed over the old man in vivid detail. Though his mind had slipped afterward, every gruesome second in the stable was etched into his memory like a nightmare on repeat. His face contorted in terror as he croaked, "Don't send me back to the stable. I can't be separated from the beast. Please, I don't want this. You'll pay for this, Xuexing. Mark my words. You'll die for what you've done to me and my horse." Xuexing met him with cold calm. "Step outside," he ordered, a flicker of something lethal passing through his eyes. Shui Beng hesitated, then retreated without a word. Turning to the men gathered in the hallway, Xuexing spoke firmly. "Everyone, keep at least 10 paces back." He sealed the doors and windows behind him. 10 minutes later, Xuexing reappeared and motioned the old man forward. "Bring him back in and continue the treatment," he instructed. "He's to stay confined in here for the next 3 days. Provide him 3 meals a day, but no visitors." Chapter 205, The Snowy Swan's Kiss. The grand hall was hushed as the king's voice echoed off the marble walls. "The fourth prince has fully recovered," he announced. "Whoever cured him shall receive a generous reward." At this decree, a frail old man was hurried inside, his face pale and drawn. The guards slammed the heavy doors shut behind him. The prince's eyes burned with cold fury as he regarded the trembling figure. "Keep a close watch on him," the prince commanded. "He must not speak of what happened yesterday, nor leave this chamber. If he tries to escape, you will answer to me." The guards bowed stiffly, their hearts pounding at the lethal intensity in the prince's gaze. Outside the palace walls, Shi Feng couldn't resist a dramatic imitation of Shui Beng's terrified scream. Qian Renshui and another attendant exchanged exasperated glances. "Truly, it is that disease," Qian Renshui said with a sigh. "Do you really think he caught it from the horse?" Shi Feng frowned thoughtfully. It's possible he was infected earlier and only broke out after yesterday's shock. The timing fits, but you don't need to worry. Shui Xing has already handled him. He won't say a word about yesterday's events. Qian Renshui's eyes gleamed. Tomorrow is Shui Xing's birthday. Could we use this scandal to undermine him? Shi Feng tapped his chin. It's not that simple. Shui Xing enjoys strong support, and we'd have to be extremely careful. If we're subtle enough, though, perhaps. He fell silent, already weighing their next move under the cold moonlight. If Shui Beng refused to admit it, it wouldn't change Shui Xing's mood one bit. Everyone knew Shui Beng had a romantic streak. Getting a little lovesick was hardly unheard of. At that, Shi Feng's eyes glittered with mischief. He snapped his fingers and smiled. "All right." Qian Renshui's face brightened. "What's your plan?" Shi Feng stood, his voice dropping to a low, serious tone. "What I'm about to bring out is extremely dangerous. Please step back." Renshui and Xiaoying exchanged worried looks, then hurriedly rose and retreated several paces. Shi Feng added, "Maintain your soul barrier and isolate your breath." With that, both women wove their soul power into a tight protective shell around themselves. Shi Feng did the same. Then, from within his soul tool, he carefully drew out a single blade of fairy grass as white and translucent as newly fallen snow. Each slender leaf curved like a swan's neck, glistening with tiny droplets of moisture. "Brother Feng," Xiaoying stared at the delicate plant, puzzled. "It's just a bit of grass. How dangerous can it be?" Shi Feng's expression turned grave. "This is called the snowy swan's kiss. It's not poisonous," Shi Feng said, "but it's, and here's the terrifying part, more dangerous than any toxin." At his words, Xiaoying stumbled back a few paces, her face ashen. "What does it do?" Qian Renshui asked, surprise widening her eyes. Shi Feng. Ji gently cradled the pale, snow-white blossom, known as the swan's kiss, in his palm, spirit power coalescing around it. "Its power lies in amplification," he explained. "It won't kill you outright. Instead, any virus or venom it contacts is accelerated 1,000-fold, and its effects grow without limit." He paused, considering the implications. With his body already suffused with potent poisons, even a sliver of that amplified toxin could shatter his vitality. He gripped the herb more tightly, the delicate petals trembling against his palm. Legends spoke of Tang San, who once used this very celestial herb to devastate the entire slaughter city. His justification was that a world steeped in darkness and despair had no right to exist. Shi Feng frowned at the naivete of such a claim. Light and dark, good and evil, coexist in every world. Even the gods cannot erase one without the other. He would find a different use for the swan's kiss, one that honored both the balance of life and the shadows lurking within it. There were depraved souls in Slaughter City. Here, death was no tragedy. Yet Shi Feng couldn't help but pity them, as if he'd climbed to some moral high ground to purge the world's darkness. He even caught himself thinking that, had he shouted, "By the moon's light, I will destroy you," it would have felt oddly fitting. Part of him bristled at Tang San's hypocrisy. If he hated Slaughter City so much, why slaughter the god realm as well? The contradiction was revolting, and, in a twisted way, almost satisfying. First, you cross Hell Road, then you annihilate the city of killing. Tang San's tactics reminded Shi Feng of burning a bridge once you've crossed it. Consume everything, then leave no trace or opportunity for anyone else to follow. Perhaps it was an irreconcilable gap in their worldviews. Shi Feng simply couldn't fathom Tang San's reasoning. Shaking himself free of the thought, he reached toward his soul tool and sealed away the terrifying fairy grass. When he'd first described the herb's effects, the two girls had stared wide-eyed, their hearts pounding at the mere thought of its power. Now, watching him tuck it safely away, they both exhaled in relief. After all, who could guarantee a creature like that harbored no viral toxins? Under magnification, the smallest spore could become a weapon of mass devastation. Bingshui and Qian Renshui hovered nervously a few paces from the table, each unwilling to step closer. Then, in a flash of understanding, Bingshui's eyes lit up. You mean we'll let Shui Bang take the Snow White Swan's kiss, she whispered, so that he eventually succumbs to that insidious illness, and afterward, the 2 guards we rescued can testify to everything. Shi Feng gave a slow, satisfied nod. Exactly. Those guards saw the entire process, and Shui Bang really will die of the mysterious disease. It's flawless. Qian Renshui's eyes gleamed with excitement. I'll be at tomorrow's birthday banquet. If Shui Bang breaks down there, I can steer him just enough to make him denounce Shui Xing in front of everyone. There will be plenty of nobles at the feast, some of them Shui Xing's sworn enemies. Once Shui Bang points the finger, Shui Xing won't stand a chance. Shi Feng clapped his hands together in approval. That's perfect, Renshui. After what we've done, Shui Bang will hate Shui Xing with every fiber of his being, but he won't dare speak up under normal circumstances. A man who believes he's already dying has nothing left to lose. Xiaoying's eyes glittered with excitement, as if she'd just caught wind of the juiciest drama in the capital. Qian Renshui tapped her chin, thoughtful. The real challenge is how to apply the Snow White Swan's kiss to Shui Bang. It shouldn't be too hard, Shi Feng replied. He lifted his arm, and a small black sparrow fluttered up to perch on his glove. Don't let its flitting about fool you. It's dead. A lifeless bird won't trigger the swan's kiss. A dozen plans sprang into Qian Renshui's mind at once. Before long, she and Shi Feng had settled around a low marble table, elbows propped, hashing out the details. Xiaoying, meanwhile, leaned back on a cushioned divan, utterly entranced, wide-eyed, silent, just there for the show. In minutes, the 2 strategists had sketched out 3 airtight contingencies. Qian Renshui sat back and laughed. There, 3 plans, and each one's foolproof. Shi Feng's grin grew wider. Swear, I can't wait to see it in action. I want a front-row seat tomorrow. Qian Renshui arched an eyebrow. And just how do you intend to slip into the prince's mansion? With an impish glint, Shi Feng shrugged. Make me your personal bodyguard, and I'll be there. In fact, let me in today, and from this moment on, I'll join your harem. Qian Renshui rolled her eyes and rapped him playfully on the forehead. Quiet, fine. If you're so determined, leave it to me. I'll arrange everything for you to enter the palace today. I'll have the chief guard meet you at the Imperial City Gate in 2 hours, Qian Renshui said. That works. I'll be there, Shi Feng replied. Their trip to the palace wasn't about sightseeing. It was purely to establish Shi Feng's credentials so he could safely accompany Qian Renshui. If an unfamiliar guard suddenly showed up by her side, it would only arouse suspicion among the onlookers. I want to go too, Xiaoying said softly. You can't, Qian Renshui and Shi Feng replied in unison. Xiaoying pouted, lips trembling. Given her position, she simply couldn't follow Qian Renshui inside the palace grounds. Shi Feng ruffled her hair and offered a comforting smile. Come on, I'll teach you a few tricks to keep suitors in line when we get back. He gently guided her away. After a while, Shi Feng checked his appearance one last time, smooths his robes, fits the mask Qian Renshui had provided over his face, and asked Xiaoying if she spotted any flaws. Receiving her nod of approval, he strode toward the Imperial City. The outer and inner cities lay open, but the Imperial City itself required a special pass. Shi Feng presented his sealed order, slipped through the gates, and stood silently in the corridor, waiting for the chief guard to arrive. Chapter 206, The Prince's Personal Guard. Shi Feng stood tall and straight, his handsome features framed by an unmistakable air of confidence. He'd barely had time to settle when an even taller, broad-shouldered man strode out to join him. The newcomer's face was as hard as iron. He wore supple leather armor that clung to his rippling muscles, and a curved saber hung at his waist. With a quick sweep of his dark eyes, he locked onto Shi Feng and advanced like a stalking tiger. Shi Feng suppressed a sigh, another stone-faced partner, it seemed, and stepped forward. "Are you Shi Feng?" the man asked in a low, gravelly voice. Shi Feng recognized the name Qian Renshui had given him. He broke into a wide grin and shouted, "Cousin, you made it!" Before the man could reply, Shi Feng threw his arms around him in a bear hug. The guard returned a vigorous pat on the shoulder, attempting a smile that looked almost painful. Then, still without a word, he turned on his heel and began leading the way toward the Imperial City. Shi Feng flashed his Prince Guard identification token at the checkpoint and passed through without a hitch. Beyond the gates lay the Imperial City, its shops, taverns, and inns far grander than anything in the inner city. The streets were less crowded than before, but the afternoon still carried a pleasant bustle. At night, a strict curfew would clear the roads, no pedestrians allowed, and any lingering traders or customers would be escorted out. A middle-aged officer strode ahead, leading Shi Feng down a broad, cobbled avenue. Shi Feng fell into step beside him, curiosity lighting his eyes. "Cousin," he asked with an easy grin, "what duties will I have in the palace?" He reminded himself of what Qian Renshui had told him. This man was his cousin Zhao Hu, newly appointed captain of the prince's guard. Zhao Hu returned a polite but guarded smile before answering in a low voice. "My lord, you are assigned as guard number 8. You may call me captain. Everyone else here answers to a number as well." With that, Captain Zhao Hu picked up his pace, and Shi Feng followed, ready to discover the responsibilities that lay ahead. "We're primarily tasked with guarding His Highness's palace and ensuring his safety," Zhao Hu explained. Number 9. A fitting title, Shi Feng thought, nodding to himself. He cleared his throat. "Did His Highness say anything else? About me?" He knew there was more to his appointment than met the eye, and he doubted he'd remain just another palace guard. Zhao Hu studied him closely, the amber glint in his tiger-like eyes softening with respect. "In private," Zhao Hu said in a low voice, "His Highness granted you unrestricted access to his private quarters. Officially, you're guard number 9, no rank above you among the outer sentries, but behind closed doors, your authority ranks second only to His Highness himself. Beyond that, my lord, I know nothing of your true station." Hearing how Qian Renshui had empowered this newcomer, Zhao Hu was certain Shi Feng must be a heavyweight within the spirit hall. After all, Wuhun Palace's dead warriors, the finest of their kind, had always stood watch outside Qian Renshui's courtyard. None had ever been permitted inside. Shi Feng barely set foot inside before he was granted VIP treatment, clear proof of his high rank in the Wuhun Palace. A pleased smile tugged at his lips. Qian Renshui had indeed pulled strings to secure him this special clearance, effectively making him a personal escort rather than just another soldier. No ordinary guard could slip past the outer walls, nor could they question the privilege afforded someone of Qian Renshui's standing. Lowering his voice, Shi Feng added, "Your Highness and I have known each other since childhood." Hearing that, Zhao Hu's heart skipped a beat. Anyone who could claim a lifelong bond with the prince had to be a formidable figure in Wuhun City, protected not only by the royal household, but also by influential nobles like Lord Chenjiang. Though respect swelled within him, Zhao Hu concealed it behind a respectful nod. At the palace gate, they presented the prince's token alongside Shi Feng's special pass. The guards exchanged a cursory glance and then stepped aside, admitting them without further scrutiny. Even the mighty Wuhun Palace couldn't place its own agents in every corner of Tiando Palace, and today, Shi Feng would stroll its corridors under the very protection of the crown. According to Zhao Hu, the imperial palace was under the watchful eyes of Shui Ye's imperial guards, while the senior generals, each celebrated for battlefield prowess, held every major gate. Even the Wuhun Palace remained sealed against intrusion. Once Shi Feng and Zhao Hu slipped inside, they followed a narrow walkway atop the tens of meters high palace wall, ducking past several patrols before finally arriving at the prince's east palace. Zhao Hu exhaled slowly as they stepped inside the courtyard. This was his domain. Beyond the outer gate waited only 9 guards, plus 2 maids who handled the prince's daily needs. Zhao Hu led Shi Feng into a small reception room, then slipped back outside to fetch the other 7 guards. Moments later, all 9 stood at attention. Zhao Hu took the lead. He bowed deeply and saluted. "I pay my respects, Your Highness." "One and all," the 7 guards echoed in unison, each head bowing in turn. Shi Feng laid a steadying hand on Zhao Hu's arm. "They're all on our side," he said softly. "You can stand at ease now." Zhao Hu snapped to attention and stepped forward, presenting several freshly laundered uniforms, a set of light leather armor, a razor-sharp saber, the prince's guard badge, and other accoutrements. "My lord, these are yours." Shi Feng offered a small, rueful smile. Without hesitation, he stripped off his travel clothes and donned the guard's attire. Within moments, he stood before them clad in matching garb, leather cuirass molded to his frame, long blades sheathed at his side. looking every bit the seasoned watchman. My lord, Zhao Hu continued, will take over the East Palace patrols. Should you require anything, simply send word. Very well, Shi Feng replied, his voice calm but decisive. Everyone else, resume your duties. Zhao Hu, show me the East Palace's layout. Though Shi Feng had slipped in and out of the East Palace aboard the Little Black Sparrow on more than one occasion, Zhao Hu still guided him through each corridor and courtyard's finer points. By the time they completed their rounds, the sky had turned indigo. Two maids approached, each carrying a lacquered box brimming with steaming dishes, and headed for the prince's private dining hall. Normally, Qian Renshui would emerge herself to claim her meals. She refused to have them delivered. Shi Feng stepped in front of the maids and held out a hand. Let me take those. These, Zhao Hu explained quietly, are for the new lord. Accepting the boxes, Shi Feng glanced toward the hall's illuminated windows, curiosity flickering in his eyes. The next chapter of his duties and his destiny was about to begin. Two maidservants bowed gracefully and set the lunch basket into Shi Feng's hands. We'll take our leave now, young master. Shi Feng nodded, waved them off, and made his way onto the covered wooden walkway that spanned the lake toward Qian Renshui's pavilion. When he reached her latticed door, he knocked softly. Shui'er, I've brought lunch. The door creaked open. Qian Renshui peered out, an amused frown creasing her brows. Honestly, I still feel strange calling you by that nickname. Shi Feng gave her a playful grin. Stick with it, you'll get used to it soon enough. He carried the basket inside and carefully arranged the palace chef's dishes on the low table. At the first whiff of their rich aromas, his eyes brightened. He picked up a tender dumpling with his chopsticks and tasted it. The flavor was exquisite, far beyond anything he could cook himself. Before he could reach for a second, Qian Renshui's hand landed gently on his arm. I haven't tested these for poison yet. Shi Feng waved her off with a smirk. What makes you think I'd let you poison me? Without a word, Qian Renshui produced a slim silver needle, her trusted tool for detecting toxins, and methodically examined each dish, her expression all business. Shi Feng set down his teacup with a soft clink and gave Qian Renshui a sly grin. She perched on the bench opposite him, cheeks puffed in mock irritation. You used my chopsticks, she complained, folding her arms. How am I supposed to eat now? Unperturbed, Shi Feng plucked a juicy slice of roasted meat from the communal platter and waved it teasingly. Don't fret, I've borrowed them for both of us. Oh, please? Qian Renshui rolled her eyes so theatrically that Shi Feng finally sighed and produced a fresh pair of chopsticks from his soul guide. She bit into the meat and glanced him over. Nice outfit today, she observed. He ran a hand through his hair, still grinning. What can I say? Some people are born to stand out. Used to Shi Feng's playful banter, Qian Renshui only half listened. She set her chopsticks aside and leaned forward, voice dropping. Any news on Shui Beng's condition? Shi Feng grew more serious. The old soul master did wonders. After half a day of treatment, Shui Beng has recuperated significantly, but he's still too weak to stand on his own and needs those potent recovery pills. Qian Renshui's brow furrowed. He pushed himself for 10 hours straight, didn't he? Shi Feng nodded. He emptied his spiritual reserves and severely damaged his cultivation root in the process. It'll take months before he's back to full strength. Silent for a moment, they exchanged a look of mutual concern. In this world of soul guides and ancient masters, even the strongest could be brought low by their own ambition. In that case, why don't you come with me to Shuixing Mansion tomorrow evening for the birthday banquet? Shi Feng laughed and leaned back in his chair. Well, if I'm officially your bodyguard now, I suppose I should sleep in your quarters tonight. Otherwise, I'm not much of a protector, am I? Qian Renshui didn't bother to raise an eyelid. You're not staying here. Go back to Xiao Ying's rooms. Shi Feng feigned disappointment. But then I'll have to sprint over first thing in the morning. She glanced at him coolly. At your pace, you'll be here in no time. He tapped his chin thoughtfully. Why not just assign me a room here? I'll be on avalanche watch, ready to alert you the moment anything happens. At last, Qian Renshui gave a small nod. Fine, there are plenty of empty rooms. Take whichever you like. Shi Feng's grin widened. Great, I'll pick the one next door. That way, if you ever feel lonely at night, you can pop in and tell me all your palace troubles. Renshue simply raised an eyebrow. Chapter 207. Departure. After breakfast, Shi Feng stacked the dishes and handed them over to a passing maid. As he turned to leave the dining hall, Xiaoying hurried in, her expression half worried, half relieved. Shi Feng, I just wanted to make sure your entrance into the palace went smoothly, she said, clutching her sleeve. She had no new intelligence to report, only concern for his safety. He offered her a reassuring smile. Everything went off without a hitch. The guards recognized my seal and escorted me straight to Renshui's chambers. You can rest easy. Xiaoying let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Thank the heavens. I'll let her know you're all settled. With that, she slipped away down the corridor, leaving Shi Feng alone to prepare for his first night on duty. Shi Feng had barely finished his small talk with Renshui when she abruptly ushered him out of her room. Pouting, he shuffled into the adjoining chamber, quickly straightened his belongings, then spread his quilt across the bed. Just as he was about to lie down, the soft murmur of running water drifted through the thin wall. His pulse quickened. The partition between her bathroom and his bed was barely a couple of meters thick. A roguish impulse flickered in his mind. What if he just stayed here and caught a glimpse of her? Shi Feng gritted his teeth and shook his head. No, he told himself firmly. I refuse to stoop to something so shameful. Despite the sudden rush of desire, he hadn't actually done anything dishonorable. Yet. Steeling himself, he climbed out of the room and made his way to the rooftop. Only by settling into meditation could he hope to extinguish the fierce yearning burning in his chest. There was no doubt about it. Renshui's allure was on an entirely different level from that plain little Xiaoying. Shi Feng pressed his back against the cool tiles, heart pounding. He'd vowed never to break the precept, but once crossed, who knew how far he might stray. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again to survey the palace below. To his left, Zhao Hu and the rest of his patrol wove along the outer wall like shadows. Dead ahead, a squad of Imperial guards stood motionless by the northern gate, their spearheads glinting in the dusk. Off to one side, a small circle of court ladies huddled beneath the eaves, whispering confidences to a eunuch who offered gentle words and a sympathetic ear. Their soft laughter carried upward, mingling with sighs of longing in the fading light. Beyond them lay the inner harem, a riot of red and gold pavilions, lanterns swinging in the breeze. Inside, half a dozen plump concubines lounged on embroidered cushions, their voices sharp with complaint. It's been months since His Majesty visited us, one murmured, tracing her fingertips along the hem of her gown. What use is this life if our bodies are left to waste away? Shi Feng's gaze lingered on their flushed cheeks and restless hands. They reminded him of a dry well. Once a single drop of water fell, a torrent of yearning would follow. He shook his head, forcing himself to look away. The emperor was old now, his strength all but spent, and yet these women waited, hungry for comfort. A quiet cough sounded from the rooftop entrance. Shi Feng inhaled and exhaled, steadying himself. So this was what it meant to be a 24-hour personal guard. Early dawn light had just begun to filter through the curtains when Shi Feng roused himself. After a quick wash, he made his way to Renshui's chambers. Pausing outside her door, he pressed an ear against the wood and heard the soft splash of water, proof she was already awake. Gently, he knocked and cleared his throat. Your Highness, would you like assistance with bathing and dressing? Silence followed for a moment, then the water stilled. A deep, rich voice, unexpectedly masculine, called out, "Number 9, come help me change." Shi Feng's heart skipped. That familiar, delicate shuo transformed into a man's voice in an instant. Yet when he heard footfalls beyond the door, the steady approach of attendants, his hope flared. He pushed the door wide open. Instead of the lithe young woman he expected, he found Renshui standing in the guise of Shui Qinghe, her chest flat and masculine. Shi Feng's face fell in disappointment. Catching his stunned expression, Renshui gave a low, amused chuckle before speaking in a tone that brooked no delay, commanding but not unkind. What are you waiting for? Shi Feng couldn't suppress a smirk. Wearing the guise of Shui Qinghe always made him seem so poised and amiable. He stepped forward, retrieved the prince's silk robe, and draped it carefully over Renshui's shoulders. The young prince's brow furrowed. Remember, Renshui said sharply, No petty expressions in public. You show only deference and obedience. I understand, Shi Feng replied with quiet confidence. I've honed my skills for years. With the jade crown now properly in place, the two exited the inner chamber. Shi Feng fell back a few paces, right hand resting on the saber at his side, soft leather armor accentuating his heroic posture, and if anyone cared to look, a remarkably handsome face. Qian Renshui abruptly halted and shot him a warning glare. Temper that rogue spirit, the prince said. Don't steal the spotlight from me. Of course, Shi Feng answered, consciously toning down his presence until he seemed no different from any other palace guard, save for that face, which would go unnoticed by most. No cameras, no glamour, he murmured under his breath, then fell into step beside Qian Renshui. Your Highness, where shall we go next? Qian Renshui spoke without turning around. Go in and pay your respects to the Queen Mother. Outside the courtyard, Zhao Hu and the other guards were already assembled. Qian Renshui led the way down a series of winding halls, and Shi Feng fell in step behind her with the rest of the escort. When they reached the Queen Mother's bedchamber, Shi Feng and his men paused at the threshold, their footsteps falling silent on the polished marble. Peering through the open doors, Shi Feng took in the scene. This wing of the palace was even more lavish than the main quarters he'd examined the night before. Seated on a low divan was the Queen Mother herself, a woman in her early 40s whose skin, despite the faint crow's feet at her eyes, still bore the glow of youth. Shi Feng was struck by her poise and grace. By court standards, her beauty was second only to that of Xiaoxue. On a nearby carpet, a little girl of 11 or 12 played with a set of ivory hairpins. She wore a pastel silk dress trimmed with lace, so delicate and refined that she might have stepped from the pages of a painted scroll. The child lifted her dark eyes, smiled shyly, and returned to her game. This, Shi Feng realized, was Princess Xiaoxue, Emperor Xueye's cherished daughter. Even Qian Renshui doted on her little sister, though whether out of genuine affection or mere duty, he couldn't tell. Inside, muted conversation drifted through the doorway. Qian Renshui remained with the Queen Mother for over an hour before finally emerging to rejoin Shi Feng and the others. Shi Feng had been standing guard in the morning sun for over an hour. Aside from a few whispered words exchanged with Zhao Hu and the other sentries, he wasn't permitted to move. This post, outside the East Palace where the imperial consorts resided, was infamous among palace guards. A single misstep, a brief glance, or unintentional brush against a concubine's sleeve, and you could be stripped of rank or worse, executed. Better to stay rigid as a statue than risk a summons back to face the Prince Regent's wrath. He shifted from one foot to the other and let out a quiet sigh. At that moment, Qian Renshui emerged from the palace gates. Her face was lit by an easy, contented smile as she waved him over. Time to return inside, she said. Shi Feng stepped forward. Actually, Qian Renshui hadn't needed to attend the morning court today, nor had the young prince. But Minister Xueye's health had taken a turn for the worse, and he'd insisted that the prince sit in on the sessions to learn the ropes. Normally, after the court adjourned, Xiaoxue would keep the prince behind for private instruction on statecraft and the management of officials. It was precisely because his presence was only occasionally required that Renshui could stroll in the gate unhurried and carefree. Once they passed back through the gates, Shi Feng let himself slump against the cool stone wall. Standing guard in the blazing sun, eyes flickering for any slight against a concubine, it was grueling work. Renshui, however, had no intention of retreating to her small courtyard. She carried herself straight to the pavilion-like study beyond the inner gardens, where a servant poured her a cup of jasmine tea. Cradling the warm porcelain, she sank into a cushioned chair and opened a stack of scrolls. Shi Feng watched her for a moment, then flexed his shoulders. Duty called, but at least for now, he could finally catch his breath. Shi Feng sat quietly beside Qian Renshui, refilling her teacup whenever she paused to inhale the steam. She had handed him several leather-bound volumes on warfare and troop maneuvers, classic texts on commanding armies, but after skimming a few pages, he found them tedious. He wasn't cut out for battlefield leadership, and the dusty tactics bored him. Glancing at the courtyard clock, Shi Feng noted it was nearly noon. His second-in-command still held court at the Shuixing estate, welcoming the first wave of congratulatory envoys who'd begun arriving at dawn. Yet here they remained, Qianrenshui utterly unfazed. Shi Feng read his throat. "Shuer, when are we going over to the Shuixing mansion?" She lifted her teacup, took a leisurely sip, and replied with her usual cool detachment, "There's no hurry. We'll leave after lunch." He couldn't let it go. "You're wearing full princely regalia, 3 layers inside, 3 outside. Must be a real pain whenever you need to, well, relieve yourself." At that, Qianrenshui's serene composure snapped. She put down her cup so sharply the porcelain rattled. With a frosty smile and a voice as clear as polished jade, she shot back, "Go to hell." Chapter 208, Avalanche Goes Crazy. Shuer, a slap is just a kiss, and a scolding is a declaration of love. Crown Prince Qianrenshui arched an elegant brow and delivered another playful smack. Fortunately, the guards stationed at a respectful distance were too far away to overhear the flirtatious banter, or they might have been in for a very awkward surprise. Shi Feng's heart thudded in his chest as he thought, these two grown-ups must be madly in love with each other. Qianrenshui only paused when he'd quite literally run out of breath. His bright eyes flashed at Shi Feng, and for a moment his composed, princely features softened into a childlike pout. "Let's go," he declared, smoothing down his robes as he stepped back. Shi Feng hurried after him. Qianrenshui settled into the waiting carriage, then rode first to the harem to collect Princess Xiaoxue. With the little princess safely aboard, the carriage departed the palace gates and set off toward Shuixing's mansion. Inside, the air was punctuated by laughter, as clear and bright as silver bells. Qianrenshui was entertaining the young princess with the stories Shi Feng had shared earlier, carefully omitting the tragic episodes that might have reduced the child to tears. Thus, their journey continued in high spirits, the two ladies chattering merrily as the carriage rolled on. Shi Feng and the others flanked the carriage on foot as it rattled along the road, while Zhao held the reins and sat up front, enjoying the driver's seat. Shi Feng couldn't shake his irritation. He was almost certain Qianrenshui had engineered this. Under any normal circumstance, that spot behind the horses should have been his. He recalled their scuffle earlier that morning and the fact that he'd gone without lunch ever since. Now, as they sped toward Shuixing Palace, hunger gnawed at him. Given his lowly status, he doubted anyone would take pity on him once they arrived. Better brace himself, he thought, and hope the palace staff didn't forget to serve him at all. Despite the chill in his stomach, Shi Feng kept pace, determined not to let his discomfort show. Whatever awaited them at Shuixing Palace, he would face it head-on. Shi Feng had been starving all morning. Shuixing's mansion lay less than a half-hour's drive from the imperial palace, and before long the prince's carriage came to a halt before its gates. The steward in charge of greeting guests recognized the royal vehicle at once and hurried forward to welcome them. Qianrenshui stepped down with graceful poise, then glanced at Shi Feng. "Young man, please stow your saber and join me inside to celebrate the prince's birthday." "At once, your highness." Shi Feng removed his long blade and handed it to Zhao who stood ready at his side. He then followed Qianrenshui and her aide Shuike through the mansion gates. The saber was merely a ceremonial token. On the battlefield, he relied entirely on his martial soul. Tucking it away before entering the prince's residence was a basic courtesy, and Qianrenshui, mindful of proper protocol, would never disrespect her guest of honor by parading a train of armed guards at his own birthday banquet. Qianrenshui had only brought one escort, Shi Feng, and on her orders, he left his saber behind at the courtyard gate. She assumed that once Prince Shuixing learned of it, he wouldn't make a fuss. Inside the estate, the other guests were being shown into the banquet hall by the headmaids. Qianrenshui herself was personally ushered in by the butler. Nearly everyone who had come to offer congratulations that day had already arrived, so she was slightly late. As Qianrenshui and Shi Feng reached the entrance, the butler's voice rang out. "Your Royal Highness, Princess Shuike has arrived." Every guest in the hall turned toward the doors and rose in unison. Even Prince Shuixing, who occupied the main seat at the head of the table, stood up. "Your Royal Highness. Your Royal Highness." High-ranking ministers, lower officials, and prosperous merchants alike all bowed deeply, their smiles deferential. Qian Renshui returned their bows with a gentle smile, took her sister's hand in hers, and allowed the butler to lead them to their assigned places. Once they were seated, Qian Renshui inclined her head respectfully toward Prince Xuexing. Then, settling beside Princess Shui Ke, she exchanged a warm greeting with her sister, ready to begin the evening ceremonies. Shi Feng hovered just a few paces behind Prince Qian Renshui, resisting the urge to dive into the lavish spread of fruits and snacks laid out on the table. He'd been hungry ever since they arrived, but etiquette and the prince's silent glance told him to remain unobtrusive. Prince Qian wasn't alone. Along with his personal escort of elite guards, nearly every court official of sufficient rank had brought a retinue. With a graceful wave, Qian signaled to Shi Feng. Reaching into the sole tool at his side, the prince produced a rolled parchment, its silk ribbon shimmering faintly in the torchlight. Shi Feng stepped forward and presented the gift to Steward Wang, the chief butler stationed beside General Xuexing. Once the exchange was made, he melted back into his shadow, content to be invisible once more. General Xuexing looked worn to the bone, the recent turmoil etched into the lines of his face. He accepted the scroll with both hands and carefully unfurled it. At the sight of the painting, an exceedingly rare and celebrated masterpiece, his eyes lit up. No one expected such a treasure to be in the prince's private collection. Folding his hands in respect, he offered a warm smile to Qian Renshui. "Thank you, Your Highness," Xuexing said softly. Prince Qian inclined his head in return. "It was my pleasure, Uncle Wang." Then, turning to Steward Wang, he asked, "Uncle Wang, why haven't you gone to fetch my undistinguished brother yet? Hasn't he arrived yet?" Shi Feng's smile flickered for a heartbeat before he masked it. He studied Qian Renshui's face, then swept his gaze across everyone else in the hall. Finally, he looked back at her and said, "Shui Beng went to my house 2 days ago and is still there. He's come down with something and isn't well enough to leave." He was convinced the man who had been tracking and ultimately rescuing the 2 guards must be here, hidden among them. When Shi Feng finished speaking, he risked another quick scan of the crowd. Finding nothing, he fought down a thrill of disappointment. Renshui's gentle smile faded. "Is Shui Beng seriously ill? As his brother, his imperial brother, I should go see him at once." Shi Feng's heart twinged with dread. That was exactly what he'd feared. Though he'd shown Renshui nothing but courtesy, inside he was shaking. He knew all too well how cold and ruthless she could be, an assassin cloaked in silk, and he dare not allow her any chance to harm Shui Beng. Shi Feng's heart skipped a beat. Perhaps the one watching him now really was the prince, he mused, but he forced a calm smile. Xuexing shook her head. "Let's not trouble His Highness. Shui Beng looks worn out. He's probably dozed off." Qian Renshui offered a polite smile and fell silent. Shi Feng remained standing with his gaze lowered, but half his attention had already drifted to the little black sparrow outside. Agent number 41 had sent it to shadow Shui Beng and collect every trace of the snow swan's powder left by his kiss. Perched beneath the window, the bird pecked at the ground for any fallen specks. A few passing guards glanced its way, then went back to their posts. Inside Shui Beng's chamber, 2 maidservants entered carrying a steaming cauldron of restorative soup. They dipped slender bamboo ladles into the broth and gently guided the warm liquid to Shui Beng's lips. He sipped gratefully, a look of pure delight spreading across his face as he paced between them. The venerable soul master presided over the scene with calm composure. The young maids, both undeniably pretty, harbored private loathing for Shui Beng's eager prodding, yet dared not pull away. His soft, insistent touch left them flushed with embarrassment. Master Shui Beng's brow furrowed in irritation as he muttered under his breath, "I'll never change my nature." In no time at all, he'd polished off an entire pot of rich, restorative soup. The 2 maidservants, alarmed by his hungrily lingering gaze, hastily rose and sidled toward the doorway, desperate to put distance between themselves and his grasp. Just then, a small black sparrow swooped in through the open window and alighted on Shui Beng's shoulder. He let out an indignant snarl. "What in heaven's name? Where did this little beast come from?" he thundered, swinging a heavy hand in an effort to shoo the bird away. The sparrow flitted nimbly out of reach, letting out a sharp chirp as Shui Beng's palm swished through empty air. Shi Feng raised a trembling hand to his neck, where faint scratches were already bleeding. He stared at the blood on his fingertips in disbelief. He'd actually been pecked by a bird. He spun around, looking frantically for the creature, but it had vanished. "Retribution," the old soul master whispered to himself, a thin smile curling his lips. At his signal, several guards burst in. They'd heard the commotion, and learning it was only a bird that frightened Shi Feng, exchanged smug, mocking glances. But then, without warning, Shi Feng's body stiffened as though struck by lightning. His back arched violently, eyes rolling into their sockets, and a bestial snarl ripped from his throat. He let out a low, agonized groan, and then an earth-shaking howl. His fingers tore at the fabric of his robe, shredding it to tatters, and he clawed desperately at his own skin. The guards froze for a heartbeat, stunned. Then they saw blood seeping from deep gouges where Shi Feng's nails had raked across his arms. Alarm flashed across the Soulmaster's face. "Hold him down! He'll kill himself," he barked. In an instant, 4 burly guards leaped onto the bed, wrestling Shi Feng's thrashing limbs to the mattress. He struggled fiercely, wild with pain, tossing them aside one by one, until they finally succeeded in pinning his arms and legs. Shi Feng's howl echoed off the chamber walls as blood dripped onto the sheets. The old soul master hurried forward, concern flickering in his eyes at this terrifying mutation. Around them, the guards tightened their grip, preparing for whatever came next. Chapter 209. Closing, without a moment's hesitation, 4 guards, their hearts pounding at the sight of that ominous red glow, leaped onto the bed and forced Shi Feng flat. In an instant, the frail man they'd known seemed to vanish. Shi Feng's muscles bulged as he thrashed wildly, his strength more feral than they could have imagined. But despite his fury, the guard's superior footing held him down, pinning each limb. Elder Soulmaster Zhao's expression turned grave. He strode forward, ripped open Shui Beng's tunic, and revealed the horrifying sight beneath. A collective gasp erupted from everyone gathered. Deep crimson veins snaked across Shui Beng's chest and abdomen, an avalanche of blood surging just beneath the skin. The guards recoiled, terror flashing in their eyes. 2 nearly stumbled backward off the bed. Elder Soulmaster Zhou's voice cut through the panic like a blade. "Secure him! Tie his hands and feet!" Jolted back to their duty, the guards hurriedly bound Shui Beng to the 4 posts of the bed, refusing even to glance at the grotesque crimson patterns that writhed across his flesh. When the ropes were drawn tight, they scrambled away, backs pressed against the wall, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as Shui Beng roared in rage and pain. "I'm going to inform His Excellency the Prince," one guard shouted, sprinting for the door. The shouting man knew time was running out. If they delayed any longer, Shui Beng's savage transformation might overwhelm them all. Shui Beng writhed on the bed like a beast gone mad. His limbs were bound, but he thrashed so violently that the wooden frame groaned and splintered beneath him. A guard stepped forward, jabbing a finger at the elderly soul master. "Hurry up and treat the 4th prince," he barked. The old soul master's face was grave. He drew on his martial soul and unleashed a pain relief soul skill, an ability that numbs sensation much like a powerful anesthetic. Almost at once, Shui Beng's back arched in one final, shuddering spasm, and then he collapsed heavily onto the mattress. In the frenzy, his trousers had slipped down, leaving his torso completely exposed. Horror swept through the room as bright red welts erupted across his flesh, quickly swelling into fluid-filled blisters. One by one, they burst, oozing thick, phlegmy pus tinged with dark blood. An overpowering stench, like that of a long-dead corpse, filled the air. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the agony and itching vanished. The Soul Master's skill had taken hold, blocking all pain signals from the prince's nerves. Shui Beng stared in terror at his ruined skin, the rash spreading in a grotesque map of red, open sores. His eyes grew wide with shock, and he seemed moments away from fainting. "Save me," Shi Feng cried out to the old Soul Master. Before he'd even finished speaking, the master's healing arts had already woven into motion. The angry rash creeping across Shi Feng's skin stilled, its advance abruptly halted. Below them, the banquet hall gleamed with lantern light. Long rows of wine cups adorned each table, and guests clustered in 2s and 3s, toasting one another and sealing new alliances. A prince's birthday feast was every bit as much a social battleground as it was a celebration. At one side, Qian Renshui stood surrounded by high-ranking officials, clinking goblets in her honor. Nearby, Princess Shui Ke, who had been chattering nonstop moments before, was now blissfully focused on devouring candied fruits. Seated on the dais, Prince Shui Xing lounged on his throne, sharing jokes with his closest advisors. Suddenly, the grand doors slammed open. A palace guard barreled in, racing so recklessly that he collided with a wine-bearer. The clay jug toppled to the marble floor with a deafening crash, crimson liquid fountaining across the tiles. A crystal goblet shattered underfoot, its shards skittering like startled birds. The maid let out a frightened shriek, and a hush fell over the gathered crowd. All eyes swung toward the disturbance, some curious, others alarmed. The guard's face drained of color, but he pressed on, bowing low as he hurried toward Prince Shui Xing. Shui Xing's features trembled, his expression darkening as he fought to smother the furious storm brewing in his chest. The great doors of the audience hall were flung open as a panting guard burst in, his armor clanking as he skidded to a halt. Every head snapped toward him. His entrance was so reckless it bordered on disgraceful. Prince Shui Beng, seated on the raised dais, sprang to his feet, ire flashing in his eyes. "Explain yourself. What's the meaning of this outrage?" he demanded. The guard swallowed hard, glancing nervously at the rows of courtiers and officials who had hastily slipped out of his path. Summoning his courage, he bowed low and leaned forward, whispering a few urgent words into the prince's ear. Shui Beng's face drained of color. The rage he'd been moments from unleashing vanished, replaced by stunned disbelief. Gathering himself in a single perceptible blink, he straightened his robes, turned to the assembled guests, and offered a courteous bow. "My deepest apologies for this disturbance," he said, voice now composed but edged with gravity. "An emergency requires my immediate attention. Please continue as though I were still present." With that, he swept from the hall, his retinue following in hurried silence. Lady Qian Renshui barely concealed a flicker of excitement as she turned toward Shi Feng. He stepped close, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "The avalanche has struck," he reported. "Our enemies won't remain buried for long, but they're disoriented. Now is exactly the window we need." "The next step is to see how you behave, Shuer," the emperor said, his gaze fixed on Qian Renshui. Standing beside him, Princess Lolita munched on a pastry, crumbs tumbling from her lips as she watched the royal guard. Shi Feng, handsome in his armor, met her eyes briefly before she turned back to her snack. But Qian Renshui's calm composure snapped in an instant. She rose so abruptly that her silken gown rustled like wings of a startled bird. Anxiety sharpened her regal features. "Follow me," she ordered, her voice echoing through the vaulted hall. Shi Feng didn't hesitate. He bowed once, then fell in step behind her as she swept toward the exit. The sudden stir caught every courtier's attention. A tall, thin man in his 60s, Minister Li of the Criminal Justice Department and a known rival of Prince Shui Xing, rose from his seat. "Your Highness," he called, voice tight with concern, "what troubles you so?" Qian Renshui paused only long enough to turn to him, eyes shadowed with alarm. The minister swallowed and pressed on, lowering his voice. "Just now, I was near the eastern gate when I heard that fourth Prince Shuibing has been attacked. They say he lies near death." At the name of the fourth prince, Qian Renshui's face went pale. Without another word, she gripped Shi Feng's arm and hurried him out of the throne room. Princess Lolita, her mouth still stuffed with pastry, galloped after them, tiny hands clutching 2 more sweet rolls. Whispers swept through the remaining ministers like wind through dry leaves. One by one, they rose and trailed behind the princess. The entire court swept up in the shock. The fourth prince had been struck down, and his life now hung by a thread. The news was nothing short of explosive, enough to send ripples through every corner of the underworld. A handful of veteran crime lords, always alert for an opportunity, were already plotting how to twist this scandal to their own advantage. Qian Renshui slowed her pace, waiting until the rest of her entourage caught up. By the time they reached Shui Beng's chamber, more than a dozen armed guards had formed a tight cordon around the door. The moment Qian Renshui and her group drew near, the sentries stiffened, weapons raised, eyes wary. A heart-wrenching cry cut through the air. Inside, Shui Beng lay battered and broken, her body ravaged, the effects of her pain relief soul technique already spent. The chief of the Criminal Affairs Department, standing among the guards, frowned so deeply it was as if he were passing death sentences with every sharp intake of breath. "Step aside!" Qian Renxue's voice rang out like a royal decree. She exuded an imperious aura, as though the very essence of an emperor stood behind her, and her words carried the weight of unquestionable authority. The guards wavered, hesitating under her gaze. At that moment, Shi Feng surged forward. In one swift motion, he gripped the nearest guard by the collar and yanked him clear of the doorway. The man flew back, stunned, and the cluster of other guards faltered just long enough. With a nod from Qian Renxue, several of her lieutenants slipped past the stunned sentries and into Shui Beng's chamber. It was already too late for Shi Feng to intervene. The moment the doors swung open, the chamber filled with horrified onlookers. As they caught sight of Fourth Prince Shui Beng's ruined form, gasps rippled through the crowd. Some clutched their stomachs, nearly expelling the delicate wines and sweets they'd just enjoyed. Others pressed trembling hands to quivering throats, swallowing hard to keep the bile at bay. Beneath the flicker of lantern light, festering sores oozed foul-smelling fluid, and great swaths of skin had sloughed away, leaving melted flesh that reeked of decay. Shui Beng looked less like a living man and more like a corpse sliding into rot. Eldest Steward Long, crouched beside the prince's bed, halted his chance. His gaunt face creased with frustration as he rose and faced Shi Feng. "My lord," he said quietly, "I've poured every healing soul skill I possess into him, and nothing has budged." Shi Feng's heart clenched at the sight of Shui Beng's agony. He exchanged a grim look with the stewards, then lowered his voice. "Do you think he's been poisoned?" Elder Shui Beng shook his head gravely. "Your Highness, it isn't the common strain. It's a mutated form of erythema MFL. Fourth Prince Shui Xing's features darkened like storm clouds. "Mutated? Worthless. What good is your answer if it's not useful?" Without warning, his soul energy flared, and he lashed out, palm aimed squarely at the elder's forehead. Qian Renxue and Shi Feng braced themselves, but before they could step forward, a slender arm, pulsing with powerful soul force, intercepted Shui Xing's strike and yanked Elder Shui Beng out of harm's way. It was Director Li of the Criminal Department, who had anticipated that the prince might kill the old man to keep him silent. After all, the fourth prince's very fate seemed bound up in whatever Shui Beng knew. Elder Shui Beng fell to his knees, clutching his head in agony. "I don't want to die! I don't want to die! Please, it hurts too much," he wailed, trembling under the weight of the prince's fury. Shi Feng activated the Eye of Punishment. A flicker of dark light swept over Shui Beng's body, revealing that several of his vital organs had already begun to rot. Had it not been for the treatment he'd just received, he would have died long ago. Qian Renxue stepped forward, her eyes cold and determined. "Shui Beng, I am Brother Huang. Tell me who did this to you, and I swear I will avenge you." Shui Xing's face went ashen. For an instant, a surge of soul energy flared around him, ready to strike, but he stifled it. He longed to kill Shui Beng on the spot, yet murdering him in front of witnesses would only confirm his guilt. And if he let him live, Shui Beng could still expose him. Trapped between two deadly outcomes, despair etched deep lines into Shui Xing's aged features. Shui Beng's voice was hoarse, but his resentment was unmistakable. "Who did this to me?" he rasped, then locked onto Shui Xing with burning hatred. "It was you, Shui Xing, that old dog. You're the one who made me like this." Shi Feng's eyes blazed with fury as he strode into the high hall. "I took only 3 grains of the pill of pure gold," he began, voice ringing. "Yet that old dog, Prince Shui Xing, had me locked in the royal stables. For more than 10 hours, I was left alone with those savage beasts. Mark my words, Shui Xing, you'll pay for this. My father will avenge me, and you won't escape your share of the blame." At his insult, a low, throaty growl echoed from the iron-barred cage at the side of the chamber. The creature's roar faltered at Shi Feng's last words, then sputtered into ragged gasps. Before everyone's stricken eyes, its flesh blackened in mere moments, emitting a foul stench that set nobles and guards recoiling in horror. Silence fell as Shui Beng, the young attendant who had unlocked the cage, found his voice. "It wasn't Shi Feng who ordered this," he stammered, pointing at the prostrate Prince Shui Xing. "It was His Highness himself who commanded me." A collective gasp swept the court. Whispers broke out instantly. If word of a prince imprisoning an innocent young man with deadly beasts reached the capital, the Tiando imperial house would be disgraced, and Shuixing's career would be ruined. Prince Shuixing collapsed to his knees, face ashen. The Minister of Punishments rose, leaning close to a guard. In moments, the guard sprinted off with the minister's jade warrant. When he returned, 2 sealed imperial edicts stood at the center of the dais, one for Shuixing's immediate arrest, the other confirming Shi Feng's innocence. The royal guards moved in without hesitation. As they led the prince away in shackles, the once terrifying beast lay silent and still, dead of its mysterious rot. The hall remained hushed. Shi Feng stood tall, the echoes of his triumph mingling with the stench of decay, as the imperial court witnessed the fall of a prince and the vindication of a wronged young man. Shi Feng watched in grim satisfaction as Prince Shuixing suddenly threw back his head and screamed, "I've insulted the Empire's honor. I deserve to die." In that instant, he brought his palm down on his forehead so hard that blood spurted, and with that, he collapsed lifeless to the ground. A stunned silence fell over the clearing. The prince had committed suicide rather than face his sovereign's wrath, an apology sealed in blood. If word of this ever leaked, the entire empire would be abuzz with scandal, and the Douluo Empire would have a field day mocking them. Shi Feng exchanged a quick, triumphant glance with Renxue. Each saw the same victorious gleam in the other's eyes. Their scheme was complete. Both Xuebeng and his son, Shuixing, were dead, and the few loose ends no longer mattered. Had Xuebeng's corpse simply decayed at an unnaturally rapid pace, suspicions of foul play would have run rampant. Poisoning would have been the immediate assumption. But in truth, Xuebeng suffered from a rare hereditary illness, one that Shi Feng and Renxue had quietly exacerbated until it overwhelmed him. No matter how thorough the investigation, the plausible verdict would be death by disease. Nearby, Sheke crouched behind a tree, her complexion ashen. She trembled violently, clutching her stomach as wave after wave of nausea racked her. Gasping for breath, she vomited onto the forest floor, her slender form shaking with fear and revulsion. It was clear she barely had the strength to stay upright. Shi Feng cast one last, cold glance at the pained young woman before turning away. The outcome he and Renxue had engineered was flawless. In the eyes of the Empire, both father and son would be remembered only as victims of a cruel genetic fate, never as the players in a deadly purge. And as for Shui Ke, her knowledge of the truth would bind her to silence, whether by guilt or by fear. Either way, their plan was done. Chapter 210, 12 years old. She pressed herself against the cool stone wall, her small frame trembling at the memory of Xuebeng's screams. Paralyzed by fear, she hadn't dared move closer. But when Shuixing, so young, had taken her own life in a horrifying, blood-soaked moment, the child's world had shattered. At barely 11 or 12 years old, she had never imagined witnessing such a nightmarish scene. Renxue hurried over, gently pulling the girl into her arms. "It's all right now," she whispered, brushing away tears. Shi Feng followed close behind, his sharp eyes scanning the courtyard. "Get ready," Renxue warned, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her heart. "When we reach the palace, father will be furious." The carriage rolled away from Shuixing Palace, and within minutes they were back on the grand road leading to the imperial court. Renxue sat beside Princess Shui Ke, soothing her with soft words, while the princess's tear-streaked face looked up at her with wide, haunted eyes. No one dared delay. Word of Shuixing's suicide had to reach Emperor Shui at once. Behind them, a procession of high-ranking officials and palace guards marched in solemn silence. Their pace was brisk, far more urgent than this morning's formal audience. Every man and woman in the convoy understood the gravity of what they carried, not documents or petitions, but news of tragedy. When they reached the palace gates, Renxue stepped down first. She turned to Shi Feng, her expression firm. "Escort Princess Shuike back to the harem," she instructed. "She's still young, and father favors her greatly." Shi Feng bowed and helped the trembling princess into the waiting sedan chair. Once she was safely on her way, he fell in behind the others. The main meeting hall loomed ahead, its red lacquer doors shut tight. Shi Feng and the assembled courtiers exchanged anxious glances as they waited for Renshui's summons. Beyond those doors lay the furious wrath of an emperor, and all of them would soon learn the cost of Xuexing's final, tragic choice. Shi Feng and the others stood at the base of the grand staircase outside the main audience hall, still feeling the echo of Emperor Xueye's furious roar rolling across the courtyard. From hundreds of meters away, the emperor's wrath was unmistakable. Shi Feng exhaled slowly. He had never imagined Xuexing's life would end so abruptly, nor that he would take his own life without a single struggle. Perhaps Xuexing realized how powerless he truly was, and that his disgrace would have earned him execution under the Ling Qi, not to mention his father, Shui Beng's wrath. In his eyes, death had become the only escape from further shame. It was well into evening before Qian Renshui finally emerged from the hall. She looked weary, pinching the bridge of her nose as if to stave off exhaustion. Concern flared in Shi Feng's chest. Gently, he helped her into the waiting carriage and saw her safely back to the East Palace. Once they were settled in a private dining chamber, servants served a simple meal. As the soft glow of lanterns danced across the lacquered table, Shi Feng poured a cup of tea and met Renshui's tired gaze. Between sips, he asked quietly, "What did His Majesty decide to do about Xuexing's death?" Shi Feng followed Qian Renshui into her private chambers. With no one else around, they could speak freely. "Make sure nobody outside learns of this," Qian Renshui said, her voice low but firm. "Father's wrath over Shui Beng's death will be fierce enough, but if word of it leaks, the whole empire will see us as a laughingstock." Shi Feng nodded. "He'll be furious, yet the real damage is to his prestige. A royal scandal like this would undermine him far more than any personal loss." Qian Renshui picked at the edge of her teacup. "That worthless brother of ours, Shui Beng, he knew we'd poisoned him, and still he didn't put up a fight. He died quietly." Shi Feng sipped his tea. "That's because, in the end, he still thought of you as his sister, the Princess Renshui. No matter how ruthless your reputation, he couldn't bear to strike back at you." She smiled bitterly. "Now that Shui Beng is gone, what comes next?" Shi Feng leaned forward. "Have you figured out your plan?" She shook her head. "I can't rush seizing the throne. Until father's health truly fails, he'll cling to every bit of real power. If I push too much poison too quickly, someone will notice." "So you'll remain here in Heavenly Dew Palace then," he said quietly. Qian Renshui met his gaze. "Yes, I need the Imperial Guards, the Royal Knights, every military asset under my control. Only when father's forces answer to me alone can I move to claim what's mine." Shi Feng didn't mind where he practiced. Anywhere would do, especially with Xue'er nearby. He could daydream that if Qian Renshui and Hu Liana were also here, it would be perfect. Of course, that was wishful thinking. His relationship with Renshui remained unsettled, and he told himself it would take years before he could melt even the iciest of hearts. Lost in thought, Shi Feng nearly missed the soft voice drifting from the secret passage. "Sister! Brother!" Xiaoying stepped into the light, her tone growing more natural by the day. Shi Feng glanced up and offered a gentle smile. "Have you eaten yet? If not, come share a meal with me." Xiaoying shook her head but still accepted his invitation. She picked up her chopsticks and, though she could only manage a few bites, she savored each one. Midway through, she leaned closer and said, "Bishop Salas just arrived. He told me that Dugubo has gone to Wuhan City, and he's brought Duguyan back to the temple." "The bishop asked me to consult you about where to put Duguyan," Xiaoying said, bowing respectfully. Shi Feng set down his chopsticks and looked over at Qian Renshui. "Cher, since I promised Grandmaster Dugubo that I'd take care of his granddaughter, I'm thinking of having Duguyan move into Xiaoying's quarters. How does that sound?" Qian Renshui arched an eyebrow. "Are you sure Duguyan will actually listen to you?" Straightening his back, Shi Feng puffed out his chest and smiled with quiet pride. "I'm certain. Her obedience runs deep, right down to her soul. If I asked her to devote herself to me, she wouldn't hesitate." He froze halfway through his boast, realizing how it sounded, and hurriedly added, "I'm just speculating, of course. I'd never actually think of such a thing." Qian Renshui snorted. Best not let that happen." She waved a dismissive hand. "I'm only teasing you for the master's amusement." Then she turned to Xiaoying. "Xiaoying, once Duguyan moves in, You're in charge of keeping an eye on her. And keep an eye on Shi Feng, too. Don't let him get any wild ideas. Xiaoying tapped the wooden spoon against her chest and said in a flat voice, Miss, you can count on me. She glanced up at Shi Feng, frowning. Big brother, how did you manage to win Duguyan's loyalty so completely? Chapter 7. Secrets Beneath the Temple. Shi Feng brushed a loose lock of hair from his forehead and flashed a roguish grin. Because I'm handsome, he quipped. Xiaoxue snorted. Please, Xiaoying grimaced. Ugh. After breakfast, Shi Feng and Xiaoying strolled through the temple grounds together, their companion Duguyan nervously tagging along. With Shi Feng's guidance, they slipped into a hidden passage concealed beneath an unassuming shrine. Within moments, they emerged into Xiaoying's private courtyard, lush with flowering shrubs and a trickling fountain. Duguyan stared around in astonishment. How is this possible? She whispered. There's a secret tunnel leading directly from the temple. Shi Feng nodded calmly. This courtyard has been my refuge for years. No one suspects it exists. Xiaoying's eyes widened. Even as the granddaughter of a titled Douluo, she'd known only the ancient halls and formalities of the Spirit Hall. She'd heard of the Holy Sun rank, second only to the Pope and outranking every platinum bishop, but to discover that Shi Feng himself held that title left her breathless. Rumor said the Holy Sun would one day ascend to the papacy. Now, standing before him in this secluded garden, she realized it hadn't been myth. Shi Feng's expression darkened. Duguyan, he said quietly, you've seen and heard too much. You must never speak of this place or the secrets of the Spirit Hall. The girl's face paled. She pressed a hand to her chest, eyes wide with conviction. Master, I swear on my life, even if my grandfather, and certainly not for my boyfriend's sake, I won't tell a soul. Xiaoying could only watch, her shock mounting. The once confident Duguyan now seemed utterly devoted to Shi Feng, her posture so deferential it bordered on servitude. Xiaoying frowned. This level of loyalty, this brainwashing, was more unsettling than anything she'd encountered in her own strict upbringing. Shi Feng relaxed his shoulders and offered Duguyan a small, reassuring smile. Good. Now, let's enjoy the morning while we can. As the three of them settled by the fountain's edge, Xiaoying's mind raced. Secrets ran deep within the Spirit Hall, and by drawing Duguyan into his confidence, Shi Feng had just tipped the balance of power. What lay ahead, she wondered, once the Holy Sun claimed his destined throne? It wasn't until after Shi Feng slipped out the door that Xiaoying turned to help Duguyan straighten the room. Only then did the question she'd been simmering over finally tumble from her lips. Yan, why do you do whatever he says? Duguyan paused, smoothing a stray ribbon on the dressing table. Because he's my master. Xiaoying cocked her head. Okay, but how did he become your master in the first place? Duguyan's fingers stilled. That's not something I can explain right now. Xiaoying folded her arms and pressed on. All right, let me put it this way. If he ever asked you to do something embarrassing, would you do it? Duguyan considered that for a heartbeat. I suppose I would, she admitted softly, even if it made me uncomfortable. Xiaoying shot up, one hand darting to Duguyan's forehead in mock concern. Oh, please, have you lost your mind? You actually have a boyfriend, you know. A faint smile curved Duguyan's lips. I'm well aware, and I trust he'd never. He'd never what? Xiaoying scoffed. Be so gentlemanly that he'd only tease you about your underwear? Duguyan's smile broadened, her eyes twinkling. He's exactly that. Honorable, considerate, never crossing the line. I have nothing to fear. Xiaoying let out a huff of disbelief, but the stubborn warmth in Duguyan's gaze told her this was a matter she would never win, and that, for once, it wasn't worth arguing about. Chapter 210, revised. With Xuexing's threat finally neutralized, Shi Feng's life suddenly felt much lighter. Dugubo had departed for Seoul City. Xuexing lay dead, and with that, no one could touch Qianrenshui anymore. 5 days slipped by in the blink of an eye, and before he knew it, Shi Feng was celebrating his 12th birthday. The party was simple, just a handful of friends at Xiaoying's house. Shi Feng himself took charge of the cooking, and even baked his own birthday cake. As he watched his friends laugh over their meal, he couldn't help but think ahead. At 12 years old, Tang San would soon be bound for Shrek Academy, and Tang Hao would almost certainly follow in secret. Once Tang San enrolled, Shi Feng planned to return to Holy Soul Village. He'd been away nearly 6 years, and he missed old Jack. He wondered if the old man was growing anxious, or perhaps even missing him already. Chapter 211, Ning Fengji. That morning, Qian Renshui finished her daily ritual and returned to her study. She selected several treasured scrolls, calligraphy and paintings of great value, and stowed them in her spirit storage guide. "Have everything ready," she told her attendant. "I'm going to visit my teacher at the 7-treasure glazed tile school." Shaer's teacher? Could it really be Ning Fengji? Shi Feng stepped outside to give Xiaoxue and the others their final instructions before they departed. When he returned, he found Qian Renshui dressed in simple robes, her grand, princely bearing replaced by an easy, unguarded grace. It was the kind of effortless charm that won people over at first glance. "Shuer," he said, reclining on a nearby bench. "How long have you been Master Ning Fengji's disciple?" Qian Renshui settled beside him. "Since I was appointed crown prince, just over a year now." Shi Feng nodded thoughtfully. "Our spirit hall has tried repeatedly to forge ties with the 7-treasure glazed tile sect. We've even reached out to Elder Sword Douluo Chenshin, but he still holds a grudge against us. Having you apprenticed to Ning Fengji could be our best opportunity." A hint of a smile curved her lips. The Heaven Do imperial family already enjoys a good relationship with the 7-treasure glazed tile sect. Once I took up the crown, formally becoming Ning Fengji's disciple was straightforward. Through Master Ning, I've been able to deepen my understanding of their school and strengthen the bonds between us. Shi Feng glanced at her in admiration. With Qian Renshui's position and her close tutelage under one of the sect's most respected masters, the Spirit Hall's hopes of winning the sect's support had never looked brighter. In the future, launching an assault on the 7 Treasures glazed tile school will be that much easier, Qian Renshui observed, her eyes narrowing with determination. And Ning Fengji is exceptionally perceptive. His unique insights are something I intend to learn from. Shi Feng smiled. No matter how clever he is, it's not because he fell for your schemes. In my book, Shuer still ranks as the sharpest mind on the entire Douluo continent. At this, the handsome Shui Qinghe shot Shi Feng a cool, reproachful glance before turning on his heel and striding away. Nearby, Zhao Hu and the others had already prepared the carriage. The mountain gate of the 7 Treasures glazed tile school is quite a distance from Tiando City, Shi Feng remarked as he vaulted up to the driver's seat. But we're headed for the school's city castle, just beyond the city walls. Recently, Ning Fengji had arrived in Tiando City, and as his disciple, Qian Renshui felt she must pay her respects. With that settled, Shi Feng took hold of the reins, guiding the carriage past the gate and onto the road that led away from Tiando City's towering walls. The journey to the castle would be short, but every step brought them closer to the master she longed to meet. The carriage picked up speed, and under Zhao Hu's precise guidance, it soon rolled to a stop before the magnificent fortress of the 7 Treasure glazed tile sect. As the richest sect on the Douluo continent, its wealth was apparent from the very sight of its ramparts. Nestled between lush green mountains and a winding emerald river, the compound's architecture gleamed with lavish ornamentation and gilded roofs. Shi Feng took in the scene with a single thought, rich and undeniably powerful. A crystal-clear stream bubbled along the front of the castle, while a gentle hill rose at its rear, as if safeguarding this palace of abundance. Steering the carriage onto the pristine white bridge that arched over the water, he guided it to the grand gate. Qian Renshui, seated beside him, slipped from the carriage with the calm assurance of royalty. The sect's gatekeepers, accustomed to the crown prince's arrival, saluted and swung the gates open without a second glance. After all, who would dare trespass on the 7 Treasure glazed tile sect, or claim to be His Highness the Crown Prince? Beyond the gates, the castle's courts and halls stretched out in a dazzling display of wealth. Qian Renshui strode forward along the marble pathway, each step echoing softly against the polished stone, as Shi Feng followed closely behind, ever watchful. Presenting their tribute to her master, Shi Feng and the others followed just behind Qian Renshui. As they neared the courtyard gates, a hastily sent servant hurried inside to announce their arrival. Moments later, the grand doors opened, and a distinguished gentleman stepped out, his face alight with a welcoming smile. Shi Feng took in the man's striking appearance. His long, lustrous black hair fell over his shoulders, held back only by a slender silver circlet. He wore an immaculate white robe that flowed around him like a pale mist. Despite the gentle dignity of his countenance, so reminiscent of Qian Renshui's own serene smile, Shi Feng was startled to learn the man's true age. Ning Fengji was well into his 60s, yet rigorous cultivation and careful upkeep had arrested the hands of time, leaving him looking no older than 40. His uncommon handsomeness, Shi Feng realized, was the kind of beauty that left women weak at the knees, a true heartthrob. But Ning Fengji was not alone. At his side stood a young girl in a simple white dress, her short hair trimmed neatly at ear level. Her skin was so pale and flawless it seemed to glow, soft as jade and inviting admiration. Delicate features and an elfin grace gave her an otherworldly air, as though she might drift away on a passing breeze. She moved quietly, trailing behind Ning Fengji with a reserved poise that only deepened her ethereal charm. As master and pupil closed the distance, Shi Feng raised his head, bowed respectfully, and prepared to convey Qian Renshui's heartfelt respects to her revered teacher. Could that be Ning Rongrong, the princess of the 7 treasure glazed tile school? Shi Feng's eyes flickered as he took her in. She was undeniably beautiful, on par with Huliana in looks, though she lacked Huliana's magnetic allure. "Teacher," Qian Renshui called out, hurrying forward. Ning Fengji paused at the gate. "Shi Feng." Shi Feng stepped forward and bowed respectfully. "Master Ning." "Come inside," Ning Fengji said with a smile, looping an arm through Shi Feng's. Together they entered the courtyard. As they crossed the threshold, Ning Fengji called out, "Rongrong, come meet someone special. This is Shi Feng, the crown prince of the Heaven Do Empire, and also my most talented disciple." His daughter, Ning Rongrong, hurried over and threw her arms around Shi Feng's waist. "Brother Shi Feng?" she exclaimed in a voice so sweet it could melt ice. Shi Feng gently patted her hair, and for a moment Rongrong wriggled away in mock indignation, until her gaze landed on the soft blue glow of a night pearl cupped in his hand. "It's our first meeting," he said, offering the pearl. "I thought you might like this." Rongrong's eyes sparkled. "Thank you, brother Shi Feng." She cradled the pearl as if it were her most precious treasure. Ning Fengji chuckled. "Don't let her innocent look fool you. Rongrong can be quite the rascal." "Father," Rongrong pouted, stamping one tiny foot. Shi Feng laughed. "A little weirdness is good for the soul. My sister Shui Kei is the same way. Someday I'll introduce you to." With that, the 3 of them strolled deeper into the castle's sunlit halls, their laughter echoing off smooth stone walls. As Shi Feng stepped forward to follow them inside, Qian Renshui glanced back and ordered, "You 2 stay out here. Don't wander off." "Understood," Zhao Hu replied obediently. Shi Feng's gaze drifted to Ning Rongrong, lingering a moment on the porcelain curve of her neck. He quickly withdrew his eyes. At her current level, she was well beyond his reach, and the rumors were that the sword Douluo's spirit resided within her. With Chenxin's power having climbed to spirit rank 96, and bolstered by the deadly 7-killing sword technique, any indiscretion on his part would result in him being cut down in an instant. True to form, Qian Renshui didn't reappear until late afternoon. Another monotonous day slipped by, and Shi Feng guided the carriage back toward the palace. Each morning he escorted Qian Renshui through the court and into the inner halls. The rest of the day, he confined himself to Xiao Ying's courtyard, honing his martial techniques. He also bore the responsibility of instructing the 2 young women, working tirelessly to sharpen their reflexes, bolster their strength, and prepare them for real combat. Evenings had become Shi Feng's favorite part of the day, a time when he and Qian Renshui could spar playfully, exchanging teasing remarks until she blushed and looked away. But 15 days later, their quiet routine was poised to change. The Royal Imperial Academy's new term was about to begin, and Duguyan would soon return to her studies. Across the Tiando Empire, every Soul Master Academy opened and closed on the same schedule, which also meant Tang San would be heading back to Shrek Academy. On top of that, Qian Renshui had at last broken through to the next cultivation tier. She only needed to hunt a spirit beast now to claim her 6th spirit ring. Chapter 212. Yu Tianheng night had fallen in Duguyan's chamber. Tomorrow, she would depart for the Imperial Academy, and Shi Feng sat at her side, walking her through the final preparations. Between them on the table lay a small porcelain bowl, into which bright red blood trickled steadily from a shallow cut on Shi Feng's wrist. Moments later, with nothing more than a focused thought, Shi Feng felt the wound squirm beneath his skin before sealing itself completely. Duguyan couldn't tear her gaze from the bowl. Her jade-green eyes shone with eager anticipation, and something deeper still, an emotion that made her pulse quicken. Shi Feng offered her a calm smile. "Drink this," he said softly, gesturing to the blood elixir. "It will speed your recovery and bolster your cultivation. You'll need every advantage for what lies ahead." Emotion flickered across Duguyan's face as she reached out. Under the quiet lamplight, master and disciple shared a single, unspoken understanding of the trials awaiting them, and the bond that would see them through. Over the past 10 days, whenever hunger pangs racked her, Duguyan could rely on only one thing: Shi Feng's blood. Each time she sank her fangs into his veins, she found his life essence far richer, far more intoxicating than the ordinary blood she'd tasted before, and utterly irresistible. To her amazement, each draught accelerated her recovery, bolstering her strength in ways she'd never thought possible. "Drink," Shi Feng said quietly, extending a porcelain bowl. His own qi and blood were so abundant that offering up an entire cup barely registered on his vitality. Before now, it had been Dugubo who supplied her with fresh blood. But Dugubo had departed for Wuhan City just days ago, leaving Duguyan helpless, like a newborn weaned too soon. Without his support, she simply lacked the power to risk venturing out and feeding as she wished. "Thank you, master," Duguyan murmured, setting her pale, delicate hands around the bowl. She lifted it to her lips and drank deeply. When she finished, her slender, serpentine tongue flicked out to clean every drop from her mouth. She still felt the familiar yearning, but one bowl of Shi Feng's blood would sustain her for nearly 10 days. Shi Feng watched her with steady calm. "I'll inform Bishop Salas of your situation," he said. "From now on, whenever you feel the need, go to the temple and ask for him. He'll provide for you." Duguyan inclined her head in gratitude. For the first time in over a week, she allowed herself to hope that her newfound strength and her bond with Shi Feng would see her through whatever lay ahead. Shi Feng frowned when Duguyan waved him off. "It's really not necessary," she insisted. "There are plenty of students at the academy willing to donate blood. We can just rotate them through." "All right," Shi Feng said, leaning back in his chair. "But aren't you worried your boyfriend will be upset if he finds out?" Duguyan's lips curved into a gentle smile. "Don't worry, he discovered my secret last semester. I told him I had a rare blood disease, and he tried to take me to every specialist he knew. When I explained that even my grandfather had no cure to offer, he finally accepted it. He still loves me just as much." Shi Feng nodded thoughtfully. "Mr. Yu Tianheng sounds like a good man, not the type to run at the first sign of trouble. But there's something you need to consider. Zombies effectively live forever. In 70 or 80 years, you'll still look young and beautiful, but your boyfriend will be an old man, nearing the end of his life." Duguyan's smile vanished. Suddenly, she looked as though she had been slapped. She seized Shi Feng's arm, her voice trembling. "Master, you must help me. I can't bear the thought of being separated from Tianheng. I want us to stay together, forever." Tears glistened in her eyes. Shi Feng gently squeezed Duguyan's hand, lowering his voice to a whisper. "There's only one way to save him. You must turn Yu Tianheng into a zombie, just like you. Will you do it?" Duguyan's breath caught. She had never imagined that the brilliant young leader of the Blue Lightning Overlord Dragon Sect might join the ranks of the undead. But under Shi Feng's calm persuasion, the idea had grown intoxicatingly appealing. Eternal youth, immortality, power beyond anything they'd ever known. She met his steady gaze. "Master, please, help me." Shi Feng nodded once. "If you're determined, I will guide you through the ritual. Very soon, you'll bring him here, and together we will complete the transformation." Duguyan's relief was overwhelming. "Thank you, Master." For spirit masters like themselves, strength and longevity were everything. Duguyan was certain that Yu Tianheng, already unmatched as the rising star of the younger generation, and heir apparent to the Blue Lightning Overlord Dragon Sect, would embrace this gift without regret. After all, in the original timeline, the sect had been all but wiped out by the Wuhun Palace. Together, they had a chance to rewrite fate itself. Shi Feng's eyes gleamed with confidence. He devised a far better plan, one that would secure the Wuhun Palace, safeguard the future of the Blue Lightning Overlord Dragon Sect, and ensure Duguyan's happiness. His strategy was simple in principle: win over Yu Tianheng. Once Yu Tianheng's loyalty lay with him, the Dragon Sect would endure, and Duguyan could remain by her lover's side indefinitely. Of course, Yu Tianheng's cultivation needed to be accelerated. Only then could the Blue Lightning Overlord be restored to the Wuhun Palace. That, he knew, would be no small feat. As for the 7 treasure-glazed tile school, Shi Feng saw little value in controlling it, unless he could sway both Ning Fengji and the sword Douluo himself. Capturing Ning Rongrong alone would accomplish nothing. A sect openly hostile to the Wuhun Palace was bound to collapse. Having laid out his plan for Yu Tianheng, Shi Feng turned to another target. This semester, head to Soto City in the Barak Kingdom, he instructed. If you come across a soul master named Tang San, the one who wields blue-silver grass, do not kill him. Remember, he belongs to me. Duguyan's brow furrowed with curiosity. Master, she asked softly, how can you be so certain of all this, of the future itself? Shi Feng smiled as he leaned back in his chair. Because I can see the future. Tang San might have been able to neutralize Duguyan's green phosphorus and purple poison with his flaming wine, but once those toxins had fused with the corpse poison, even he was powerless to counter them. That was why Shi Feng had stepped aside and let Duguyan save Tang San's life. Rising to his feet, Shi Feng strolled to the door and flung it open. In the next instant, Xiaoying came rushing in and collided with him, clutching her forehead as she staggered back. Have you heard enough? He teased, crossing his arms. Blushing, Xiaoying snapped, I'm not eavesdropping. She was a loyal maid, sworn to carry out Qian Renshui's orders above all else. There was no way she'd let Shi Feng get away with mischief. I'm heading out, he said, offering her a wink. All right, master, be careful. Xiaoying called after him, still rubbing her forehead. Shi Feng chuckled and gave a last wave before slipping out the door. Once he was gone, Xiaoying hurried across the room to where Duguyan stood. Lowering her voice, she asked, Miss Dugu, what did he just tell you? They were speaking so quietly I couldn't catch it. Xiaoying hovered at the doorway, pausing when she spotted Shi Feng and Duguyan sitting calmly at the table through the latticed window, hardly the picture of 2 people who'd been tossing and turning all night. If she hadn't seen them there, she'd have stormed in long ago. It's nothing, Xiaoying said quickly, as Duguyan's curious gaze met hers. Master was just asking if I'm settling in all right. Duguyan arched an eyebrow, unconvinced. Before Xiaoying could elaborate, she asked, Then why do I keep hearing you call out every night? Xiaoying's cheeks went pink. She looked down and murmured, He said, well, he insists that daily massages will help me develop properly. A slow smile spread across Duguyan's face. Is that so? I've got plenty of experience in that department. Let me show you my technique. It'll be far more effective than his half-baked efforts. Really? Xiaoying's eyes sparkled. Duguyan puffed out her chest and grinned at her friend. Well, what do you think? There was a reason Shi Feng hadn't allowed Duguyan to bring Yu Tianheng along yet. He was preparing to depart with Qian Renshui in just a few days. To claim her 6th soul ring, Qian Renshui needed to journey into the Star Doe Forest, a trip that would take at least 10.5 months. That meant Yu Tian's situation would have to wait until his return. At the same time, Shi Feng planned to return to Holy Soul Village, and since Qian Renshui would be heading to the Southern Star Forest anyway, he decided to combine the 2 trips. Although the routes weren't identical, the detour would be minimal. When Shi Feng arrived at Qian Renshui's chambers the next morning, he ended up lingering far too long. After several awkward minutes, the reserved young woman, far more demure than the ever-outspoken Juliana, politely but firmly showed him the door. Though she already held him in high regard, she wasn't yet as open with her feelings as Juliana had been. Chapter 213, Return to Nodding City. 2 days later, before dawn's first light, Qian Renshui and Shi Feng slipped quietly out of Tiando City. Their journey would take roughly a month, and Qian Renshui had already made her preparations. To the outside world, she announced that she would retreat into seclusion for a month of intense cultivation, a declaration that earned no objection from Shuiye. After all, cultivation was the true measure of a royal's strength. Just as the court began to whisper that the crown prince's martial pursuits were waning, 2 elegant carriages rolled out of the southern gates. From the outside, they looked unremarkable. Inside, however, they were spacious and luxuriously appointed, incorporating specialized soul guidance technology to dampen sound and suppress any fluctuations in spiritual energy. This feature not only ensured privacy, but provided formidable defense against unexpected attacks. The carriages had been custom-built by the Wuhun Hall at Solace's insistence. He could not risk the safety of both the high priest's granddaughter and the scion of the royal line. 8 horsemen led the procession, with another 8 in the rear. Each rider was a covert master from the Wuhun Palace, chosen for their discreet loyalty rather than ostentation. They kept their distance, forming a silent ring of protection as the 2 carriages rolled smoothly down the road. Shi Feng sat opposite Qian Renshui, studying the pre-dawn horizon. His features were calm but alert, every sense tuned to the slightest disturbance. Qian Renshui wore a serene expression, her eyes closed, as if already within the depths of her inner world, though she, too, remained vigilant to their surroundings. As the party crossed the outer plains, the first rays of sunrise gilded the landscape in pale gold. They were on their way back to Notting City, a journey that would mark the beginning of new trials for both of them. And as the wheels turned, neither could predict the dangers or the revelations that lay ahead. Zhao Hu and the others didn't follow the main party. They remained behind in the East Palace, keeping themselves out of sight. Meanwhile, in one of the moving carriages, Shi Feng sat alongside Qian Renshui and Princess Xiaoying, deep in conversation. He had originally been assigned to ride with the 9th elder, but between the stern old man and 2 beautiful young ladies, Shi Feng had chosen company, so, with a cheeky grin, he slipped over to join them. The instant he appeared, both girls turned to him with wide, incredulous eyes. Unfazed, Shi Feng chuckled softly. "Shuer just told me that you've grown up a lot lately, Xiaoying. Truly, your brother insists on seeing for himself." The princess and Qian Renshui flushed crimson. In a mix of mortification and anger, they each kicked out at Shi Feng, who'd perched himself on a low folding stool by the bed. With lightning reflexes, he caught hold of Xiaoying's small, jade-like foot and gave it a playful flick. Xiaoying let out a surprised groan. Her foot recoiled as if shocked, while both girls' cheeks burned even brighter. "It's a lesson for you, using your hands and feet against your brother," Qian Renshui said coolly. "Miss, he bullied me." Xiaoying stamped her foot, arms crossed in frustration. With Xiaoying outmatched by Shi Feng, she'd come to Qian Renshui for justice. But Qian Renshui merely arched an eyebrow. "If it isn't serious, you may return. My daughter and I have private matters to discuss." Shi Feng's expression sharpened. "Actually, I came up here to train." Qian Renshui tilted her head. "Then why not practice in the rear compartment? 9th elder is there. He can give you pointers." Shi Feng grimaced. "9th elder is snoring so loudly I'd need earplugs to focus." Suppressing a sigh, Qian Renshui said, "Fine, but unless I say otherwise, you are not to interrupt our conversation." "Understood," Shi Feng replied with a respectful bow. "Without your permission, Shuer, I won't disturb you." Still, his thoughts drifted elsewhere. Sliding into a lotus position against the carriage wall, he closed his eyes and began his cultivation exercises. Although this afternoon's session had yielded little progress, the steady accumulation of effort was undeniable. At this rate, they would reach the southern border of the Heaven Do Empire in about 10 days. Without rigorous training, things can get dull fast. It's been a month since Shi Feng left the killing capital, yet his cultivation remains stuck at level 44, and he knows he must push harder. Tang San, by contrast, has stalled at level 29, a full 15 levels behind. Shi Feng's goal isn't merely to preserve that lead, but to widen it. After surviving countless life-and-death trials, backed by the Spirit Hall's vast resources, and even benefiting from a piece of rare fairy grass, it's no wonder he stands so far ahead of Tang San. Comfort breeds complacency, and Tang San's 6-year slog to level 29 at Nodding Soul Master Academy, an institution free of mortal danger and populated by mostly weaklings, proves the point. Surrounded by true geniuses, he wouldn't have broken level 29 at all. Step by step, Shi Feng's confidence only grows. Shi Feng's progress with his cultivation during the day was gradual. Nothing required his undivided attention. This freed him to tune in to the soft whispers passing between the two girls nearby. On the road, this unhurried pace of life felt unexpectedly pleasant.